Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Brian, your mom's anniversary is coming up soon. Have you thought about what you're going to get her? Or maybe she's been hinting at something for you. Elizabeth is a young, vibrant woman with lots of hobbies. I'm at a loss as to what to get her, Emily told her husband. I could certainly give her a complete makeover at my hair salon. You know very well what talented girls work in my salon. Hair, makeup. Elizabeth's mom will look great, but it's as an addition to the gift. Emily, I'll think about the gift. I will definitely think about it. But not right now. I have an important meeting this morning. Gotta be in shape, Brian replied. Okay, sweetie. Good luck to you. Emily kissed her husband on the cheek and went to shower herself. She had to get ready for work too. The day was scheduled into the evening. Brian, after eating breakfast and drinking coffee, threw on his jacket and left the apartment. Emily was still at home. Brian didn't go to work right away. He picked up his mistress first. She was his part-time secretary. Good morning, my beloved Brian, cheerfully replied the girl Samantha. She got into the car with Brian and kissed him passionately on the lips. The man reciprocated. Missed you. I missed you too, Brian replied calmly. Pulling out of his seat, they drove to work. Honey, are you taking me to your mom's house for the anniversary banquet? Samantha asked on the way out. The secretary knew Elizabeth had an important date coming up. Samantha, I really want to go to the birthday party with you and not your nerdy wife. But how would that look? Do you have any idea? Well, honey, please, Samantha pulled longingly, kissing Brian's cheek in parallel. Well, I'll try to think of something, Brian replied briefly. Samantha rejoiced. Their relationship with Brian was now almost 8 months old. All that time they had kept it artfully hidden. His wife Emily didn't know about them. But one day, Brian's mom spotted them. It happened in a cozy restaurant where Brian brought Samantha to celebrate the receipt of his large grant, and neither of them had expected to see Elizabeth there. She was sitting there at a table with some strange man. I don't tell anyone about you, and you don't tell anyone about me, was her response as Brian and Samantha walked past her table in an embrace. That was the deal. But Samantha wanted to make her claim on Brian more serious. Brian is a successful young architect with big ambitions. He was exactly the kind of husband she wanted for herself. Samantha thought that Emily, Brian's wife, was not at all suitable for him. She was too plain for him, even though she worked in the beauty industry, where everyone, according to Samantha, should always look perfect. In her heart, the secretary envied Emily for having a husband like Brian, and he should only be her man. Samantha decided that she had to go to Brian's mom's anniversary party instead of his legal wife, Emily, so that she could show herself off to everyone. Emily was completely devoted to her work. She and Brian didn't have children yet, and they weren't in any hurry to have any. They were each passionate about their work. Emily worked in the beauty industry for a long time. She had her own beauty salon, which she annually expanded, updated, and added new services. Her love for beauty started back in 8th grade. It was then that she began to experiment with her appearance, dye and trim her hair, make different makeup. In the 11th grade, the girl, in parallel with her studies, studied at short-term courses in hairdressing. After school, Emily entered college, where she studied the basics of beauty and business. The first year after receiving her diploma, the girl worked in someone else's salon. Having gained experience and confidence, she took a loan from the bank, opened her own beauty salon, which became successful. With Brian, they just met in her salon. He came into the barbershop for a haircut. Emily met him. During the haircut, they got to talking, and Brian liked Emily. Determined, beautiful, educated. He asked her out on a date, and so began their relationship, which ended in marriage. Emily worked and did not even suspect that her husband had a mistress. The mistress, on the other hand, was well aware of Emily. She was personally acquainted with her. Emily sometimes came to see her husband, but it was very rare, and Samantha would examine Emily from head to toe. Unsuspecting, Emily chatted sweetly with Samantha while waiting for her husband and could even tell her some of the family secrets that Samantha would later use against her. Samantha was determined that she would go to the anniversary with Brian. She needed to go with him at all costs and sideline his wife Emily. But what would she come up with? The secretary pondered intensely, so she decided to enroll her friends in the beauty parlor. At lunchtime, the girl called the hair salon. "Girl, hello," Samantha said in a friendly voice to the salon receptionist into the phone receiver. "Good afternoon, Beverly's Beauty Salon. How can I help you?" "I'd like to make an appointment with Master Emily Smirnova for a haircut and color, May 21st at 5 p.m. "I'm sorry, but Master Emily is not available at this time on May 21st. I can offer you another master." "No, I don't want another," Samantha said capriciously. "I want Emily specifically, and specifically on May 21st tonight." The receptionist on the other end of the line fell silent, then said, "Please leave your phone number. I'll talk to Emily's master and get back to you." The satisfied Samantha left her contacts. Emily was also at the salon at that moment. "So, Lisa, any dissatisfied customers again?" the salon owner asked. "Yes," Kate nodded. "On May 21st, a client wants only you to take her. But May 21st is your own mother-in-law's anniversary. You won't be able to see her, even though she promised to pay good money for the job." "And what time do you need to take her in?" the owner clarified. V17. "Okay, 5 p.m., Emily pondered. "The anniversary banquet starts at 8. Purely theoretically, if I'm already packed myself, that is, with hair and makeup, I can make it in time." "Emily, what if you can't make it?" the receptionist suggested. "Your mother-in-law wouldn't be very happy about that." "I'll make it. I don't want to lose any customers, so I'll do the cutting and coloring." "Well, see for yourself." Kate shook her head and entered Emily's appointment for May 21st for the girl who had just called. Samantha was glad she had managed to get an appointment with Emily, and not someone else. Actually, she didn't need someone else. Samantha would send her best friend Rachel instead. Rachel's the one with the long hair and the eyelashes. Lips, of course, are done too, and that's the Rachel who knows how to piss anyone off. Especially men, of course, but she's good with women too. Samantha and her friend had made a deal a long time ago. In the evening, Emily voiced to Brian that she would get to the cafe where his mother's anniversary banquet would be held by herself. "Brian, you'll pack everything up on May 21st by yourself. I'll get everything ready for you, pants, shirt, jacket." "And you?" the man inquired. "And I'll come straight from the saloon. I have some business to attend to. I have to get my client ready for the gala." "Okay, but are you sure you'll make it in time? Will you be there?" "Of course I'll be there. But watch my place. Just please don't forget my mom's anniversary. It's very important to her. No one has forgotten how you didn't show up at her birthday party," Brian said. "That was pure accident," Emily exclaimed. "I just got the dates mixed up back then, and it was because of recycling. You know that very well, don't you?" "Why do I need to be reminded of that?" Emily remembered the day when, having just met her future mother-in-law, she had been personally invited to her birthday party. Her mother-in-law had said, "Let's sit with you in the cafe closer, get to know each other." But Emily accidentally mixed up the dates and did not come. She was working with a client at the cafe that day. Her phone was on silent. What was her horror when, after letting the customer go, Emily saw 8 missed calls on her phone. 2 of the missed calls were from her mother-in-law, and the rest were from Brian. She realized that something had happened, and in a fright she called Brian, who reminded her that Emily was actually supposed to be at her mother's birthday party. That's when Emily realized everything. After the incident, she apologized to her mother-in-law for a long time, and she forgave her. Emily tried not to allow such an oversight again. Elizabeth's anniversary was approaching. Emily was ready for it. And so was her husband, Brian. The girl bought a beautiful black tight dress, perfectly emphasizing her figure, red slip-on shoes. Her hair and makeup she had already discussed with her colleagues on May 21st. In the afternoon, they would do it right for her. Brian was to arrive at the anniversary by himself in his car at the appointed time for a haircut and coloring. Emily's friend Rachel came over. Emily saw the client and immediately knew she was in for a challenge. Emily knew girls like her. Rachel was Brian's mistress. She strictly instructed her to stall. You could even make up a reason on purpose and cause a scandal. Emily was prepared to thank Rachel well if she did a good job. Rachel understood. She knew she had come to see the legal wife of her friend's lover. At first, there was no sign of trouble. Rachel settled into the chair. She and Emily agreed on what they would do. Emily set to work, doing everything carefully, using the best and highest quality materials. Actually, Emily's salon has proved to be exceptionally good. Then Emily accidentally touched Rachel's ear with the tip of the scissors when she twitched, and she only needed an excuse to find a reason to start a fight. "Are you trying to kill me or something?" the client shouted. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It was a complete accident because of the way you twitched." Emily was polite and didn't switch to you to her. Rachel, on the other hand, began to immediately provoke the foreman. Then Emily stepped back to the table to stir the coloring paint. Rachel grabbed a pair of scissors and deliberately cut herself where Emily had accidentally touched her. And Emily saw the whole thing in the mirror. Everything Rachel was doing was reflected there. "What are you doing?" Emily asked fearfully, turning to the client. "A killing," Rachel shouted, smearing blood on her neck. The receptionist and another handyman working in the next room ran to the scream. "Call the police right away," shouted Rachel. "What the hell happened?" "Why the police?" asked the receptionist fearfully. "We'll take care of this ourselves." "Yeah, you will," Rachel said angrily. "Are you going to cover for your landlady?" "I know you. I won't talk to you without the police." Rachel picked up the phone to call the police herself and called everyone to everyone's surprise. 2 police officers arrived. The whole time until they arrived, Rachel sat in the chair on the phone, and Emily sat next to her on the couch. She still didn't understand why her client was doing all this. She tried to talk to her, but she just stared at the phone and mumbled, "I'm not going to talk to you until the police arrive. When they get here, then I'll talk to you about everything." Emily looked at the clock on the phone and began to feel sad. She realized that she was unlikely to make it to her mother-in-law's anniversary today. "What's your emergency, citizens?" said the first policeman, entering the beauty parlor. "Seems like such pretty girls." "There she is." Rachel jabbed a finger in Emily's direction at that. "Wanted to kill me, stab me. The girl is hysterical." "So calmly, citizens," replied the policeman, accustomed to such situations. "Let's get this story straight." And Rachel began to tell the story in order, but as she saw it, or rather as she wished to see it. "This is the master," the complainant pointed again to Emily. "I went to her for the first time on the advice of a friend. In the process of cutting my hair, she almost stabbed me with these very scissors." Rachel still had the scissors next to her, which were covered in her blood. Look at me. My appearance is ruined. What do you say to that?" The law enforcement officer now turned to Emily already. "The client is exaggerating." Just before Emily could utter the words, Rachel screamed hysterically, "Exaggerating!" running up to Emily and grabbing her by the hair. The police officers didn't react immediately, as it happened suddenly. They separated them, though not as quickly. Rachel clung to Emily's hair with intent. "So let's both go to the squad now. We'll deal with this on the spot." "I can't go to the department. I have to be at the anniversary at 0800. "I can't miss it," Emily spoke up. "Unfortunately, this is an event you will miss today," was all the staff replied. Taking the girls under their arms, they put them in the car. It all happened so suddenly that Emily didn't take her purse or her phone with her. She drove off without anything, missing Elizabeth's anniversary for the second time in her life. At the station, these proceedings dragged on until midnight. Brian, Emily's husband, tried to call his wife many times, but to no avail. He was very angry with her for letting him down so badly by once again not showing up at his mother's house. He didn't bother to call her parlor to ask where his wife was, in case something serious had happened to her. Instead, he called his mistress Samantha. "Samantha, hi, are you busy?" he asked. "No," calculated Samantha, who had been expecting this call from Brian. "He packed into my mom's for the anniversary. Emily set me up. I'm really upset about it. I'll be at your place in half an hour. We'll go together." Samantha cheered. She was already in full parade, since her friend Rachel had reported to her that they were stuck with Emily for a long time at the police station. The red cocktail dress, black slip-on shoes did the trick, and Samantha was simply adorable. She had all eyes on her that night. And poor Emily sat in the police station all evening and half the night. That evening, Brian's relatives all asked him what kind of companion he had with him and where his wife Emily was. But Brian only kept silent or answered very evasively. It was a serious step for him to publicize Samantha to everyone. But what to do about Emily he didn't know. His jubilant mother, for whose sake everyone had gathered at the cafe that evening, had not brought up the subject with her son at all. "Citizen Emily Smirnova, this girl Rachel Ivanova came to you today for a haircut and coloring," questioned police officer Michael Emily. The matter was taking a serious turn as Rachel wanted to write a report on her. "Yes, she made an appointment with me a few days in advance, showed up on time, and everything was fine. Yes, I admit that I had a bit of a scissor tip on the client. My hand came off because Rachel twitched." Emily didn't have time to finish before Rachel interrupted her. "So it's my fault," the girl shouted. "You want to blame everything on me now? That your hands are growing out of the wrong place, and that it's everyone who praises your salon so much. Is that it?" "Citizen Ivanova," shouted back Michael, who had already been handed the two ladies in the department. "No interruptions. I'm the one asking the questions here. One more remark, and I will be forced to send you to a temporary detention cell." After that harsh remark, Rachel fell silent. Emily began to continue. "So you admit to hitting the girl with the sharp scissors," clarified the investigator. "Yes, I admit it, but not much at all. That is, there wasn't even a drop of blood," replied the salon owner. "Well then, how do you explain the fact that Rachel has cuts on her neck? It looks silly, but she took a pair of scissors and made some cuts herself." "What?" Samantha's friend angered Samantha loudly and angrily again. "I'm not lying, Mr. Policeman, and the security cameras installed in this room of my salon can attest to that. Having cameras changes the case." The investigator picked up his cell phone and made a few calls. "John, please go to the salon and check the sect cameras there. I've sent the address now in a private message." With that, Michael hung up the phone. "Go to the cell now, sit there for a while, and once I get the sect footage, we'll continue the conversation. It will be clear there which one of you is lying. But I want to warn you right away that we have penalties for perjury as well." Samantha froze. She hadn't even thought about the security cameras. "Oh shit," Samantha said quietly. Michael couldn't hear the words, but Emily, sitting next to her hysterical client, could hear them clearly. The investigator took Rachel and Emily to a small cell. There were no windows in it, only a small bench on which both girls could barely fit. Emily had forgotten about her mother-in-law's anniversary. When she remembered it, she jumped up and began knocking frantically on the door. At her frantic knocking came one of the warders. "What do you want?" he asked in an indifferent voice. "May I have a phone call?" "Please," Emily begged. "You're not supposed to," the warden also indifferently replied, and closed the door right in front of Emily's nose. Emily walked over to the bench, sat down on it, wrapped her arms around her head, and cried. Rachel, who had been watching her hairdresser the whole time, remained silent. The girl once again realized that she had done her job completely. Brian and Mom's anniversary party was over. The guests, having said their goodbyes, were going home. "So where are we going with you now? And where are you even with Emily tonight?" Brian was asked by his mistress. "Where is my wife?" "I don't know. She's not answering her phone. In fact, I was thinking maybe Emily and I should get a divorce. I'd be only too happy for that to happen. It's what I've been waiting for all this time. Divorce her, marry me. But you can't get me back to the registry office so soon." "That's all right, I can do it. I can wait." "Well, where are we going?" "My place." Samantha wasn't relenting, and she wanted to continue this evening with her boss specifically. "I don't know," Brian shrugged. "How about my place if my wife isn't home?" Samantha, having been invited to his home for the first time by her lover, didn't believe it at first. "Are you seriously saying that now?" "Quite seriously." "Let's go to your place." I finally waited. Samantha, but that's assuming Emily's not home. What if she shows up out of the blue? Samantha was a little afraid of Brian's wife. Well, I'll think of something. After all, you are my secretary. Brian and Samantha got into the car and drove to the apartment where Brian had lived for several years with his legal wife, Emily. In the entryway, Brian was greeted by a neighbor who squinted at him. "Hello," the man said dryly. "Damn you," Brian reprimanded. "You should have been sure to get caught," said the man faintly, whereupon they entered the apartment. "Well, now the neighbor knows you've been bringing your mistress to your place?" Samantha giggled. Brian didn't appreciate the joke, gave her a stern look, and she abruptly stopped talking. While Emily's husband was having fun with Samantha in their apartment, Emily was spending that time in a jail cell. She and Rachel sat there for about 2 hours, after which Michael came to them. "Let's get out. The surveillance video is here." The girls obediently got up from the bench. "Let's go to the investigator's office again." "Now I know exactly which one of you is lying," the policeman said, and looked around at Emily and Samantha. Samantha immediately averted her eyes from his gaze. "I'm letting Emily go home now. You, Samantha Ivanova, on the other hand, are spending the night here." "Why should I spend the night here?" the girl asked angrily. "For preventive purposes," replied the investigator briefly. "Why did you slander Emily Smirnova? What purposes did you pursue?" "Because the camera shows that you deliberately took a pair of scissors and started cutting yourself." Samantha was silent. "Well, why aren't you saying anything?" "Nothing to say." Rachel still had nothing to say. Michael then turned to Emily. "And you, citizen Smirnova, can go home." Emily sighed with relief and walked out of that damned office without looking back. It was well into the night when she walked out of the police station, taking a deep breath of fresh night air. She was very glad to breathe it in, as the air in the cell where she and Samantha were locked up was stale and almost stale. Emily began to search through her jacket for her purse, out of habit, and immediately remembered that she had left it in her salon, as well as her cell phone and wallet. The salon, of course, was already closed, and she couldn't get into it because she didn't have the keys. Emily cursed to herself. What should she do now? Walk home? Before she could think of what she should do, she was called out by investigator Michael, the same one who had questioned her along with Rachel. "Emily, wait," she looked around. "Are you trying to get me into that awful cell again?" the girl asked with a smile. The investigator smiled back at her. "No, not at all. I believed you at once. But this citizen Ivanova immediately seemed suspicious to me. You know, for 10 years of service I have learned to identify people by their appearance, by their behavior, by their bits. Where are you going now?" "Yes, I'd like to go home. But I don't have any money or a cell phone. And now how to get home in the dark, deep night. It's a big mystery to me." "Where do you live?" "In Brooklyn on Leanoff Street." "So we're on our way then. Let me give you a ride. I need to get there, to the investigative division." At another time, as a decent girl, she would have said no, but not now. "Where's your car?" looking around, Emily asked. "There it is, the white and blue one," pointed to a car with police identification plates. "Oh, shall we go with blinkers?" smiling again, Emily asked. "No, not at all, with blinkers only if something serious happens." With that, Emily got into the police car and she and Michael drove to Brooklyn. "I'll admit to you that this is the first time I've ever ridden in a car like this," Emily spoke after a long silence. "But everything happens for the first time sometime," the man replied affably. "I'm sorry your evening tonight was ruined." "Yes, it was spoiled very badly. You have no idea how. But share it with me. I was supposed to be at my mother-in-law's anniversary party tonight, but I didn't show up. Just like that, for no reason at all. I didn't show up at her party. We were supposed to meet my husband there. I can imagine how many missed calls I have on my phone from him right now. And I can't even imagine what he's going to say to me about it now. He'll understand you. I'm sure he will. I'd like it to be exactly as you said. I'd also love a cup of hot herbal tea with a little spoonful of honey," Emily said dreamily. "Yeah, you could really use a cup of hot tea right now after all you've been through. By the way, have you known this client of yours, Rachel, for long? No, I saw her for the first time yesterday. I thought she was just trying to get back at you for something. Revenge on me? No, that's out of the question. She was just in a bad mood. She needed to vent her emotions on someone, and she got me. That's all, Emily replied. I don't know. Personally, I don't think so, insisted the investigator, a man who had learned to see through people over the years. Meanwhile, Michael had already given Emily a ride home. Thank you so much, said the girl with gratitude in her voice. If it weren't for you, I'd have to spend the night on the street somewhere. But you're welcome. I hope I won't see you and I in situations like this again. With that, Emily ran into the entryway, quickly made her way up to the third floor, and began to unlock the apartment. The keys to the apartment were in her jacket pocket. At first, the girl thought about ringing the bell, but then decided not to bother her husband. He's probably also tired after the anniversary. Maybe he had a drink. Emily quietly opened the door, took off her shoes and outerwear. Then she tiptoed into the kitchen. On the kitchen table was an unopened bottle of expensive dry red wine, her favorite, by the way. This bottle had been brought to Emily by a friend from Georgia. But it wasn't so much the bottle that confused the girl as the two glasses standing next to it. Emily cautiously approached the table. On one of the glasses found traces of lipstick, which clearly did not belong to her husband. Her heart hammered harder. She tried to breathe deeply to keep the horrible thoughts out of her head about who Brian might have been spending such a nice evening here in her absence while she was in a jail cell. She gathered her resolve and went to the bedroom, opening the room door sharply and wide. Emily saw two people lying in the bed. She walked over to the light switch and turned on the light. It brightly illuminated their small bedroom. In the bed lay Brian and his secretary Samantha. They both woke up quickly. Brian jumped off the bed and quickly wrapped himself in a sheet. Emily, where have you been all this time? I've been calling you, her husband's voice was startled. Actually, I've been at the police station. But what are you doing here? That's something that needs to be sorted out. Samantha, on the other hand, just pretended to be a poor sheep and opened her eyes wide with her false eyelashes and flapped them, suggesting Brian should be the one to vent alone for all that Emily had just seen. I give you 10 minutes so that neither you, Brian, nor you, Samantha, are in the apartment, Emily said loudly, slammed the bedroom door and walked out of the apartment, going outside to wait there for the two men to come out. Emily went outside and saw that Michael's car still hadn't left. She didn't go over to it, just sat down on the bench outside the driveway. She needed to catch her breath. She'd been through too much in the last 24 hours. The investigator, seeing Emily, approached her himself. Is something wrong, Emily? He inquired. She nodded silently, barely restraining herself from the last of her strength. A tear rolled treacherously from her right eye. I see what happened. Imagine I come home, and there is my husband in our bed with his mistress. The mistress is his secretary. I thought that only happens in movies. While Emily was sharing with the cop what she had seen, Brian and Samantha came out of the entryway and walked in silence. I'll file for divorce myself, Emily shouted after them, and then cried. Michael did not comfort the girl. She herself had to endure this pain, and it could be endured. Emily sat on the bench near the entrance, went up to the apartment in her clothes, collapsed on the sofa in the living room, and fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, it was long past morning outside the window. She jumped off the couch, at first not realizing what had happened, but gradually her memory began to come back to her. She remembered everything, and she felt very sad again. She had to get ready for the salon. Her purse was there along with her phone. She had no notes today, for she had to return from her mother-in-law's anniversary. The day was free. She only needed to get her personal belongings from the salon. She quietly drank coffee, fried some scrambled eggs, though she didn't feel like eating at all, took a shower, went to the salon. At the salon, of course, her co-worker girls pounced on her with questions. Emily, how are you? How did it end yesterday? You left your phone, didn't you? The girl briefly told them all about catching her husband with his mistress. She wanted to keep silent at first, but with the girls in the salon, they were like a family. So, with determination, she said, And I'm divorcing my husband." "What?" they all exclaimed almost in a voice. "Yes, imagine, this night caught him in our bed with his mistress, his secretary," Emily said in a sad voice. "Kicked him out of the apartment in the middle of the night and fell asleep on the couch. He didn't even go into the bedroom. After everything I've seen, I don't want to go in there. Emily, we're going to get you a cleaning service. I don't need you cleaning up after them." And the receptionist, Kate, who was the most active among them, picked up the office phone and booked Emily for 5 p.m. cleaning. "Okay, that's one thing done. Let's move on to the second. Emily, let's have a glass of wine." Emily started to refuse. "What are you guys doing?" "No, I just came to get my phone. I'm going to go home now. I'm going to get over what I saw." "You need a glass of wine right now, just as a therapeutic and sedative." Kate pulled a bottle of wine from the nightstand at those words, also pulled out 2 glasses, then poured from the bottle for herself and Emily. Emily refused, but finally gave in under Kate's strong onslaught and emptied her glass in a volley. Kate realized that Emily needed to release the tension, or she would have a hard time, and that could lead to a nervous breakdown. That glass was followed by the next. Emily relaxed a little. Kate did too. "Emily, why don't we go to your husband's place of work? Let's give them a fun life there," Kate suggested. "You should get revenge." Emily, having had 3 full glasses of wine, had already managed to both cry and laugh. What to do with her life next, she didn't know. Everything had collapsed in an instant. "Shall we?" Emily said abruptly. "I have nothing to lose. I don't see any further life together with Brian." Emily stood up and, staggering a little, went to the exit. The girls hailed a cab to the office. The 15-minute ride sobered Emily up a little, but not quite. She was still determined to tell Samantha everything she thought of her. Reaching the office, they quickly walked into his office. Emily walked quickly to the desk in the reception area where her husband's secretary usually sat, but didn't find her there. Emily then went to her husband's office. There sat her Brian, Samantha, and 2 other men Emily didn't know. "Well, gentlemen, hello there," Emily said artistically loudly, standing in full view of everyone and staggering a bit. Then walked over to Samantha. "Hello, my husband's mistress. So, just tell me honestly, is Brian good in bed?" And at those words, Emily leaned in close and close to Samantha. "Emily, you're drunk. Go home," Brian said loudly but clearly. He was ready to fall through the ground with shame at that moment. "And I'm not talking to you at all." Emily poked Emily angrily in Brian's direction. "I'm here for this one." Emily abruptly grabbed Samantha by her dyed blonde hair. She managed to pull a good chunk of Samantha's artificial hair out. She also managed to flop Samantha to the floor. Yes, so much so that her short skirt was pulled up. The secretary exclaimed, "Let go of me, you hysterical girl. Brian, save me." "I'm hysterical, and you're trashy. You're a real bitch." At those words, Emily even managed to drag Samantha across the clean office hardwood floor a bit, after which the men ran up to her, pulling her away from Samantha. Samantha got up off the floor, pulled off the hem of her skirt, ran over to Brian, who hugged her. "Get out of here," he shouted to her. Emily, satisfied with what she had done, swayed a little too, and walked out of the office. "Well done, friend," Kate said to her. She had been standing beside Emily all this time, watching her in silence. Kate hadn't expected such decisive action from her friend at all. Then they hailed a cab, which took the girls home. Emily arrived home and went straight to bed. After a couple hours of deep, drunken sleep, she was awakened by the doorbell. She didn't realize who it was, but then she remembered that Kate had called her cleaning service. Emily felt really bad, but there was nothing to do. She got up to open the door for the cleaners. Still, cleaning the apartment was something she needed to do, but she wasn't able to do it herself. She got up, opened the door for the workers. There were 2 of them, a woman about 45 years old, and a young boy who looked to be 20 to 22 years old. Emily outlined the front of work for them and went to the kitchen to make herself some tea. About 2 hours later, when the workers had not yet left, there was a heavy knock on the door. A frightened Emily ran to the door and looked through the peephole. It was her still husband, Brian. She had no choice but to open the door for him. He'd come into the apartment anyway. He had the keys. "You're a complete fool," Brian started yelling at Emily as soon as he walked in, but then quieted down a bit when he saw that his wife wasn't alone and switched to a whisper. "You blew such a deal for me today. You fool." "Are you saying it was my fault?" "No way, Brian. It was your own fault when you brought your secretary to our house last night." "No, but I had to think of something like that. I could have come home at any time." "And how long have you been with her?" Emily asked. "But that doesn't matter anymore," replied Brian. "Yeah, you're right. It doesn't. I won't have time to file for divorce today, but I will definitely do it tomorrow. The stipulation in our prenuptial agreement, you remember, I hope. The one who cheats leaves the apartment to the other spouse. You cheated. Kindly pack your things as soon as possible and get out of my life." Emily didn't just utter the last words, she shouted them loudly. The poor employees were very frightened. They didn't think such a family drama would play out in front of them. "Hush, are you getting mad?" Brian yelled at her. "Get used to yelling at your secretary." "Not me," replied Emily. "You have half an hour to get the hell out of my apartment." An hour later, Emily was alone in the apartment. Brian, having hastily packed his belongings, had moved out. Except where Brian was going, Emily didn't know, but it pained her to think that he would be living with that secretary now. The cleaners were gone too, leaving behind a perfectly clean apartment. Emily was left alone in that apartment, miserable. If only someone would heal her wounds as well, as the cleaners had cleaned the apartment, cleansed her of the love for Brian that had plagued her. Emily cried all night. In the morning, she got up in a broken and depressed state. First of all, the amount of alcohol she'd had the night before. And secondly, Emily loved Brian very much, and she couldn't forget him quickly. And third, she had a full record today, so she had to get cleaned up and get to work. Kate was luckier. She only had lunch, so she could afford to get some sleep. Emily, with all her willpower in her fist, ate breakfast, got in her car, and drove to work. Though the day was hard, Emily lived it, or rather survived it. It was the day she even filed an online divorce petition. She pondered for a long time whether it was worth it, but finally checked the right box. In the evening, she went home and took a hot, relaxing bath. Everything about the apartment reminded her of Brian. He, by the way, had also received a notice that his wife had filed for divorce. He checked the box, which meant he'd accepted it too. Although Emily was under the illusion that Brian wouldn't agree to divorce her so quickly. Lying in the hot bath, Emily pondered what she should do now, how to organize her future life, except to work more. Emily could think of nothing else. So she went to work. 6 months had passed since Brian and Emily's divorce. Emily was working very hard, but she was also thinking a lot about Brian. Lately, she had often wondered if maybe they had divorced for nothing. She should have forgiven her ex-husband and moved on as if nothing had happened. After all, he had asked for her forgiveness. But she was proud. She didn't forgive him. So now she lives alone. And how would she like to lean on a strong man's shoulder once in a while? One day at her salon, there was an incident that hurt Emily even more. His mistress Samantha had signed up for the salon. But she didn't sign up with Emily herself, but with another master. Samantha came in happy and satisfied. Emily thought she was glowing with happiness. During the coloring process, Samantha told the technician that she and Brian were expecting a baby. Emily, who was behind the wall in the other room, heard this and gasped. It hurt her deeply to hear it. They'd been with Brian for almost 5 years, but they'd never even thought about having children. And some secretary mistress was already having a baby with her ex-husband in less than a year. Brian and I haven't even come up with a name for our baby yet, as we don't know his gender for sure. But we already love him so much in absentia, the secretary shared with the mastermind. She did it on purpose. She hadn't seen Emily herself in the salon, but she was sure that the employee would tell her boss everything. Emily was completely freaked out by the news. She hadn't been herself for days. Her girls at the salon saw the whole thing. They tried to do something to cheer her up, distract her, but they had little success. One day, Emily's friend Michael, an investigator she knew, stopped by the salon. He was very surprised to see Emily there. "Emily, is that you?" But as you can see, Michael, are you the one who signed up for my modeling haircut, or is it still about that case? Do you want to question me? No, it's not a case. Actually, it's a personal matter. I made an appointment at the salon, but I had no idea that it would be you and that it was your salon. I remember that you were brought by that girl who claimed you from the beauty parlor. Well then, you and I were destined to meet again. Now take a seat in the chair. And Emily showed Michael to the barber's chair. Emily gave the investigator a quick and excellent haircut. In the process, they talked, and Emily admitted to Michael that she had divorced her husband. After all, he had been an unwitting witness to that family drama. It unfolded right before his eyes. It all happened because of that cheating, the man clarified. Brian apologized to me, but I didn't find the strength to forgive him. He's happy now. He and his secretary Samantha are going to have a baby soon. Well, how about you? Are you happy? Not really. My life just isn't working out. Emily, you know what? I'll take you out to a restaurant with me tomorrow. Emily was very surprised to hear this invitation from the investigator, but she surprisingly accepted it gladly. Great. I'll pick you up tomorrow then, Michael said and left the salon. Emily, you're so good for accepting his invitation, her co-worker girls told her. Life goes on, doesn't it? And here, maybe something will work out. He is a prominent, solid man. The main thing is that he was not married, and the rest can be fixed. Emily was preparing for this usual dinner or date. She was nervous, so she thought carefully about her image. She wore a dark maroon dress, black high-heeled shoes. She rarely wore heels, but she liked how spectacular she looked in them. So she tried to go out at least once in a while. She put on a black blazer. Michael met her in his personal automobile. It was a gray Volvo, not new, but quite a decent car. He was dressed in jeans and a loose-fitting shirt. On his feet were moccasins. Emily, did you like the way he looked? Simple, yet classy. I'm going to take you now to a certain restaurant that has delicious seafood. Michael purposely cut the haul short, which made Emily laugh. She laughed openly and sincerely. She loved seafood, but she didn't spoil herself with it on a daily basis. After all, it was from a series of expensive foods. Good, I'm already excited, the girl replied through her laughter. The atmosphere in the car was friendly, thanks to Emily's easy laughter. Michael started the car, and they drove to the seaside restaurant on the other side of town. The drive had to be over a bridge. Unfortunately, the man and woman didn't make it to the right place in time. About halfway there, some black car started cutting them off. Michael started to pull down to the right curb, but the black foreign car wouldn't budge. It was hanging right on their tail. Emily watched everything going on in the rearview mirror. She realized that something was going on that wasn't right, and she was scared. Michael, is everything okay? The girl asked fearfully. I don't know what's going on myself, he replied, deftly steering the car. I don't understand what the car following me needs. Michael was being a little sly. The black foreign car hung on their tail like that for a few minutes, then pulled onto a deserted road. The window of the black foreign car opened and a man with a gun in his hand half leaned out of it. Get down, Michael shouted. Emily, get down. A terrified Emily pushed the front seats back as far as possible and sagged. Michael increased his speed as the man from the black foreign car began firing. The only sounds that reached Emily were muffled thuds. At one of the forks, Michael managed to make a sharp turn and drive away. But the black foreign car didn't have time to react so quickly and went straight through. Whew, I think we lost them, Michael said as he realized they were no longer being chased. Emily, can you get up? Emily, with beautiful makeup but very scared, got up and sat down on the seat. What was that all about? She asked, adjusting her beautiful burgundy dress. And I haven't figured it out myself, but it looks like you and I have the restaurant canceled. I realize, of course, that you're an investigator and that all sorts of things can happen on the job. But to be shot at in the middle of the day like that is just unbelievable. That's never happened to me before. I know where the wind is coming from, because I'm handling a very serious case for a serious man. But to come to this, I never imagined it. I'm afraid to go home after this, Emily said quietly. but I was going to suggest we go to my place without any second thoughts. I'll invite you over. We'll buy a cake and drink tea, since you and I didn't work out with the seafood. Emily hesitated. She didn't feel comfortable going to a stranger's house. She was afraid to rush things. All right, just take me home tonight, and just please, no shooting. Emily was scared to death of this incident. She had never seen a gun before in her life, and now she had to experience the horror of it all for herself. Michael was an experienced investigator. He memorized the license plates of the black car, called the traffic police to run their owner. But he himself, of course, had already guessed who it was. Emily cautiously entered Michael's apartment. It was 3 bedrooms and quite spacious for him alone. "Do you live here alone?" Emily asked. "Yes, I do now," he answered quickly. "My wife and I divorced 2 years ago. We have a child together, a girl named Lucy. She's 5 years old." "And where is your wife and daughter now?" Emily asked. "In the same city, but in a different neighborhood. We parted with her peacefully." Emily immediately wondered. She wondered, why do people who have children in common get divorced? After all, children should be like glue for spouses. They should keep them together. "And why did you get divorced?" "If you don't want to answer, don't answer. I won't take offense. It's a private matter between you and your ex-wife, after all." "No, I can answer that. In my line of work, I spend a lot of time at work. You could say I live at work." She wasn't happy about it. At first she accepted it, turned a blind eye, but over time she stopped doing that. We started to fight a lot. At the kindergarten where Lucy had been going since she was 3, she met a single father. He brought his son Mike to the group. The boy's mother had run away from them with some military man 6 months ago. Mary, that was my wife's name, would often walk Mike to the playground after kindergarten. Well, this single dad used to go there a lot too. That's how they got together. While I was away, my wife didn't waste any time. Maybe it's my fault, because I didn't spend enough time with them. I regret it now. Now I spend a lot of time at work. I have no one to rush home in the evenings. "No one is waiting for me at home," the man said. Emily listened to him in silence. "It's a pity that things turned out this way for you. But everything in this life is given to us for a reason. I'm alone too. And I get so lonely sometimes. Work is good, of course, but it's even better to have someone waiting for you at home." "You're right. Yes, Mary doesn't forbid us to see each other regularly. Once a month I take her. We go out with her somewhere fun. She and I look forward to those meetings too. I love her very much. Sometimes I look at my daughter and mentally ask her forgiveness for the fact that her mother and I were not able to keep the family together. It hurts to know that another man is spending more time with my daughter. He teaches her things, scolds her for mischief, buys her goodies, spoils her. And you're like a father on the weekends? Even now, years later, I can't accept it. On the contrary, now I regret that Brian and I did not have a child. For some reason, I didn't think about it when we were married. But when I heard from his mistress that she was pregnant, I immediately felt a pinch in my chest. Wanted too this simple female happiness. This evening, Michael and Emily was an evening of revelations. Each shared their thoughts and feelings about their previous relationship. Somewhere around this time, the investigators sent the contacts of the owner of the black foreign car that had chased them with a gun today. It was exactly as Michael thought it would be. The car was registered to the father of the young man whose case Michael was now prosecuting. He was frustrated as this investigation was about to get even more complicated. More recently, this car had already been spotted behind Michael. Around 9 o'clock, Emily asked Michael to drive her home. He agreed, not to leave the woman overnight. They drove home without adventure this time. Emily was afraid to even go up to the 3rd floor. Michael walked her up to her apartment. "Not invited to tea," Emily said, smiling. "Some other time," he replied, and Emily ducked into her apartment. But it didn't take long for the girl to enjoy, or rather be saddened by her loneliness. She was disturbed by a loud knock on the door. Emily was very frightened and immediately thought that suddenly the black car with a shooting man was chasing her today. Overcoming her fear, the girl looked out the peephole. Standing outside the door was her ex-husband, Brian. "What do you want?" Emily asked without opening the door for him. "It's late." "Emily, open up, I want to talk." She didn't feel like talking to him at all, but she had to open the door. "Sorry it's late, but you weren't home." "I've been pounding the pavement here for a while," Brian said as he walked into the living room. "You're rearranging." "Yeah, I wanted to do something new with my life, since I've only got work on my mind. So I started by rearranging." Emily looked at Brian and realized that her ex was so damn good, and there was nothing she could do about her attraction. All she had to do was artfully hide it, and she was doing a great job at it. "So, tell me, why are you here?" Emily asked. She didn't want Brian to linger precisely because of her insane attraction to him. "Emily, I just now realize what a treasure I've lost," he replied in surprise to Emily. "Samantha. That's not it at all." "Wait, Brian. How are you expecting a baby?" Samantha announced it herself when she came to the salon for her treatments. "Waiting," he replied quietly. "She lost the baby." What a terrible thing to say. "I'm really sorry to hear about it. How you're holding up." Emily walked over and hugged him. Brian gave into her embrace and hugged her tightly too, and then they turned to face each other, and their lips came together in a kiss. Emily realized she was making a mistake. She still liked Brian, but in her mind she knew he wasn't her man. Things had ended between them long ago, the night Emily had caught him with his mistress. In the end, Emily couldn't handle her emotions and dissolved into her ex-husband's arms. That night, Brian and Emily spent together. In the morning, the former spouses woke up in the same bed which was once their family bed. "For nothing, of course I did it," Emily said. "I had already cut you out of my life, and now here you are back again. What are you going to tell Samantha?" The girl thought that Brian would tell her now that he and Samantha had broken up and were no longer living together. But the man didn't say that. "Sleeping, probably as usual. She's a sleepy one, ready to sleep until lunchtime every day. She won't even notice my absence. All right, I'll get ready." Brian got out of bed and began to gather up the things he had scattered in the passion of the evening. It took a couple minutes to get dressed, and suddenly they were disturbed by the doorbell ringing. "Are you expecting someone this early?" "I'll go get it," Brian said. He hadn't had time to button up his shirt yet, and as he did so, bare-chested, he went to answer the door. "Good morning," replied a male voice behind the door. Emily didn't realize who it was right away. "Good morning," Brian replied. "Is Emily home?" "She's home." "Emily, is there someone there to see you?" She walked to the front door and saw Michael standing there with a bouquet of delicate, fragrant roses. "These are for you." Michael shoved the bouquet right in her face. "I didn't realize you weren't alone. You were the one who told me yesterday that you were divorced again." "It's not what you think," Emily hastily tried to justify herself. "And I don't want to think anything," he replied, after which he turned and walked quickly down the stairs to the street. "But that's what you opened the door for. Now, he'll think we're back together." My own fault," Emily mused aloud. Brian, on the other hand, didn't react in any way. He just got fully dressed and followed Michael out of the apartment. Yesterday, he had needed Emily solely to satisfy his ego. He'd made sure his ex was still eager to see him, and he lied to her about Samantha last night, too. His mistress, whom he still hadn't made her his lawfully wedded wife, was pregnant and was due to give birth to his son very soon. Emily, naive, had no idea what her ex-husband's devious schemes were. She hadn't thought about it at all. All her thoughts were now on Michael. She could lose him now. And he was very upset to see her ex-husband in Emily's apartment. In his mind, he was already building a family, a relationship with Emily. But in reality, it was as if Brian and Emily were back together. Emily called Michael's cell phone several times, but he ignored her calls. She tried texting him, but he responded dryly, "Emily, I didn't know about you getting back together with your husband. I won't bother you anymore." And that was it. That was the end of the correspondence. The rest of the messages of the girl Michael left unanswered. Emily blamed herself for this night with her ex-husband. After all, it would lead to nothing good. They wouldn't be together with Brian anymore. Even though he had broken up with Samantha, If not Samantha, it would be some other woman next time. But one day turned Emily's entire view of Brian and Samantha's relationship upside down. Samantha made another appointment at their salon for a haircut. And what was Emily's surprise when Samantha didn't lose the baby at all, but on the contrary, she was about to give birth to it. Emily looked at Samantha with her big belly in bewilderment. "What are you looking at?" The mistress responded quickly. "You couldn't give birth, and here I am just about to give birth to Brian's son. Become a mom." "Samantha, you didn't lose the baby. What are you talking about?" Emily scolded at her. "No, of course I haven't. It's alive and well. Why would I have lost it? My pregnancy is going well. My back is just a little sore, but that's normal at my term." "Got it," Emily replied. "Come on in and sit in the chair. It's just that I've been told." Emily didn't finish the thought until the end. Calling Samantha over to Samantha's office, she called the handyman who was supposed to be working on her. Emily herself, stunned, sat in the break room. "Did Brian really trick me?" thought the girl to herself. But why? What purposes he pursued? Emily did not understand. Then she decided to send her ex-husband a message. "I am very happy that soon you will have a son, and all the things you said to me the night before that night, a vile and vile lie. You can't play with things like that." Emily wrote the last letter of that message and tossed the phone into the chair. The cats were scratching at her soul. Once again, she was alone. Periodically, Emily called Michael. She still hoped that she and he would finally go to that delicious seafood restaurant. She liked him. She was ready to confide in him and had already told him a lot of her life. It had been Brian who had opened the door to her apartment that ill-fated morning when Michael had come to her with flowers. The flowers, by the way, were very fragrant and pleased the girl for a long time. Emily called, but Michael didn't answer. She did not give up trying and continued to call and write. Not often, so as not to be too intrusive. One day Emily called again, and, oh my God, she got an answer. "Michael, hi," Emily said in a cheerful voice into the receiver. "It's not Michael," answered on the other end of the line. "Not Michael? Who is? Did I get the wrong number?" "No, you dialed the number correctly. It's just that Michael can't answer right now." The voice was male. Emily wondered why and who it was that answered his phone. "When can I call back?" "I can't answer that for sure. He's in the hospital, in a coma." "What?" exclaimed the girl so loudly that in the salon all the co-workers jumped up in their chairs and looked in her direction. "What happened to him?" "A traffic accident happened involving him. He's been injured. He can be visited, but only for a little while." Emily didn't even ask who answered from Michael's phone, just wrote down the address of the hospital, jumped in her car, and drove to him. All the way there, the girl caught herself thinking, why is she rushing to him now? She wants something serious to happen between them. Yes, she liked him. She was ready to try a relationship with him, and she was getting really tired of being alone. At the hospital where Michael was hospitalized, his co-workers were there. Emily realized this from the police uniforms. "Hello." The girl approached one of the men. "You're Michael's co-workers. How is he?" "His condition is serious. They're operating on him right now," a man about 45 years old replied. "What happened? And who are you?" the man asked suddenly. He wasn't ready to tell the first person he met about what had happened to his colleague. "I'm his girlfriend," Emily lied defiantly. She realized that a man in uniform wouldn't just tell her about Michael's medical condition. "Girlfriend? Did he have a girlfriend? He hasn't been seeing anyone since the divorce. We only started dating him recently." Emily was quick to respond. "Michael hasn't had time to announce our relationship to anyone yet. The incident has to do with a case Michael has been on lately." "Was it that black foreign car by any chance?" "Yes, that's the one. It clipped him on the highway several times, and to avoid hitting an oncoming car, he drove into a ditch. His Volvo hit a tree, and the airbags deployed. But still the impact was so strong that our colleague was injured. The doctors give a good prognosis for his recovery, so let's hope so." "And what's your name?" "My name is Emily." The girl extended her hand to the man, who shook it in return. "And I'm David Thompson. Michael and I are colleagues, both investigators. And what's the case Michael's on right now? It concerns a prominent man in town, or rather his son. But he'd better tell you about it when he comes to his senses. The secrecy of the investigation has never been abolished, and David Thompson was silent. Can I see him? Not today. His mother came to see him, so they let her in. Only relatives are allowed in. Yeah, well, I'm nobody to Michael, said Emily sadly. The girl was allowed to Michael only 3 days later, when he was transferred from the intensive care unit to a regular room. All these days Emily learned through David Thompson about his well-being. David told Emily everything in detail, and when Michael was transferred to the regular ward, Emily visited him herself. She bought various fruits, juice, other groceries and went to him. Michael, hi. Walking into the room, Emily said. I wish I could scold you for not returning my calls and texts. But now, due to recent events, I won't do that. So how are you? The girl asked. Michael was sitting on a hospital bed with his head bandaged. But as you can see, alive, writhing in pain, he said. The doctor said I'll live. That's right. The right attitude is half the battle. Emily began pulling the groceries she'd brought out of the bags. How did you know? Your good friends told me. I see, no one can keep quiet. Although they seem to work for the police. You don't like that I came. Emily suddenly felt resentful. It seemed to her that Michael was unhappy that she was here. For nothing, she'd spent the last few days anxiously waiting. I can leave if I'm bothering you. Emily began to defiantly pack. No. You've got it all wrong. It's just that I'm worried. What will your husband think? Husband? Yes, your husband. He lives with you, doesn't he? He was just coming to see me about a case back then, which we've already finished safely. We don't live together anymore. He's having a son soon. I told you about that already. After that, Emily changed the subject to something else and started asking Michael about his health. Michael was in the hospital for another 2 weeks, and Emily visited him almost every day. Michael appreciated this devotion, and his mom did, too. They crossed paths with Emily a few times in the hospital hallway, and she got to know her in absentia. 2 weeks later, Michael was released from the hospital to home care. Emily began to visit him often, helping him around the house. He lived alone, and sometimes it was difficult for him to take care of himself. He hadn't fully recovered yet. I hope I did a good job, asked Emily. Yes, honestly, I didn't expect such tremendous support from you. You could say, pulled me through. A couple times Emily even stayed overnight at Michael's place in separate rooms. There was nothing going on between them. They just had a good time together. What's up with your case? Emily asked Michael one day. The girl was genuinely worried about him. What case? Michael didn't immediately realize what Emily was talking about. Well, the one you got hurt over. You know about that too, he wondered. And who told you all that? I don't know everything. Or rather, all I know is that that black foreign car cut you off again. You drove off into a ditch and hit a tree. So, tell me about it. What's this case you're on? Not anymore. The head of the department took it away, said I'd had enough. So I'm hurt, he said. I didn't give up the case, of course, but due to my extended sick leave, I had to give it up. Are you sure you're interested in what I do? Yes, right here, very much so. I haven't had any familiar investigators yet. The underside of their work I don't fully know. This is a case I started on about 2 months ago. The son of a well-known man. I won't mention his name. Everyone in town knows him. Committed a criminal offense. A company of young men, which included the suspect, let's say, Vadim, were driving drunk in a car around the city. The car belonged to Vadim, and he was also driving it. He hit a group of people at a crosswalk. Music was playing loudly in their car. They did not immediately realize what they had done, so they drove away from the scene of the accident with loud music playing. An ambulance was called to the injured by eyewitnesses. The company that Vadim ran over consisted of young and beautiful girls, and one of them was seriously injured. She's still in the hospital. And the rest of them got off with abrasions, bruises, and fright. Doctors do not give any prognosis yet. She's being treated in the trauma ward. So what? And this Vadim guy won't admit his guilt now. Yes, although the SECT cameras that were installed at that crosswalk clearly show that he was driving. But his lawyer, hired by his rich father, is trying to convince the investigation otherwise. They're putting pressure on me and the head of the investigation department. It's not the first time I've been followed by that black foreign car when you and I wanted to go to the restaurant. The suspect's father has been pressuring me, offering me a bribe to close the case or blame the crime on someone else. Which one? They would have found one quickly, but I can't do that. The investigation is still going on as there are a lot of witnesses to interview, and it all takes time. Vadim is still sitting in the pretrial detention center, and his father is trying his best to get the guy out of there. He seems like a nice guy, though. He admits his guilt. He's studying at Millionaire, but now he'll have to forget about his studies for a long time. He'll come out of prison a completely different person, of course. Yeah, Emily sighed. One wrong move can change a whole life forever. Drunk driving is a very big danger, that's for sure. And do you know how many behaviors like that? How many situations like that I've seen in my practice? I can't even list them. I can't even imagine. I work in a beauty salon. There is nothing like that there. Though I'm wrong. Emily laughed. You remember the story of my client Rachel. Still impossible to forget. Michael laughed. By the way, that was definitely the first time I've ever seen a girl take a pair of scissors and use them on herself in a salon. It's a total thrash. What kind of idiot do you have to be? This is also the first time in my practice. And the man and woman laughed in sync. Michael and Emily were having a good time. They continued to see each other, and even managed to go to the very unfortunate restaurant they didn't get into the first time. Emily really liked it there. Gradually, their relationship went to another level. They became a couple. Emily has already officially announced it in her beauty salon. Girls' colleagues are very happy for her and said in a voice that accidents are not accidental. One day, walking on the waterfront, Emily and Michael met Emily's ex-husband Brian and his mistress. Brian never asked Samantha to marry him, and she was rolling a stroller with a baby in it down the walkway. A couple months ago, the couple had a son who they named Mike. Brian, hi, Emily said, bumping into him on the walkway. To pretend they supposedly hadn't been noticed would have been foolish, though Emily didn't really feel like talking to them. She would have gladly walked past them without paying attention. Hi, Emily, Brian replied, while examining Michael standing next to him from head to toe. Michael had an athletic build, so he attracted attention from both men and women. May I congratulate you on the birth of your son? Yes, Brian replied. I have a new status now, one I haven't fully explored yet. I'm a dad now. That's great, said Emily. I'm glad you're happy. But you're happy too, I see, Brian replied, pointing a glance at Michael. Yes, happy. You're invited to the wedding, Michael suddenly said. Emily almost gasped in surprise. You have a wedding coming up? Congratulations, Samantha said. After talking a little more on distracted topics, the couples went their separate ways. What was that just now? Emily asked, turning to him. It was the truth. Emily, marry me. And Michael pulled a small red box out of his pocket. In it lay a ring with little shiny stones. What a beauty, Emily gasped. So, do you agree to marry me? Yes, I do, she replied. Immediately, Michael put a ring on her ring finger. The wedding was a month later. There were parents on both sides and closest friends. Emily was the happiest bride, even though it was their second marriage. Each had experience of married life under their belt. Emily in the new marriage tried not to make the mistakes of the first. Yes, Michael worked hard, but Emily also spent a lot of time in her salon. Weekends they always tried to spend together. Emily began to often bring up the subject of a child in conversations with her husband. Michael was never against children. The couple began to work on this issue. They did not work long, because a year later they had twin girls, who were named Carrie and Sally. The news that Amanda and Oliver had decided to get married came as a complete surprise to the villagers. Of course, you can't hide anything in the village, and people were saying that the two were sort of dating. But how did they date? They stopped and talked. That's all they met. They didn't even gossip about it, because they knew there was nothing going on between them. I mean, who's Oliver? He's a vet. Graduated from college, I think. He came here to work after his studies. So he's not even Oliver, but Oliver Andreevich. A respected man and a stranger to the village because he's considered a city dweller and a scientist. Amanda, in fact, is Amanda only on her passport, but the whole village knows her as Emmy. Of course, nobody would say anything bad about her. On the contrary, everyone thought that she was a good girl, hard-working, modest and pretty. She didn't leave the village after finishing school. She joined a farm as a milkmaid. And this, by rural standards, is also a positive quality. And they have a farm, not a bad house, though not a new one. A vegetable garden, animals, so she's a good bride, but that's for the local grooms. What did Oliver see in her? It was strange to people, and some of them were even offended, but they did not ask questions. The two young men decided to marry, and that was fine, though some doubted the strength of the union. He will hang around here and go back to the city, but whether he will take her with him is unknown. Who needs her there in the city? And he's not really interested here either. He needs her house and household, the evil tongues speculated. But so far everything seemed to be fine with them. They had a proper wedding. The bride looked quite happy, and the groom too. Some even thought that maybe Emmy was different from other girls, since the vet saw something special in her. Maybe she'd study. After all, she'd finished school as well as anyone. Why didn't she go to the city right away? Where could she go if her father died a few years ago and her mother was ill? Who would her daughter leave her for? And now that she's a married woman, maybe she'll go to school herself. Why not? But a couple of months after the wedding, it became clear why the marriage took place. People saw Amanda's belly growing. The wedding was only in October. Now the New Year holidays have not yet come, and she is clearly not 2 months, and all 5. That is, apparently, meetings between the vet and the dairymaid were limited not only to talk, and somewhere in the summer they went out more significantly. But this again speaks of Oliver's seriousness. He did not abandon the girl, did not refuse. Married, and they live as they should. No one will say anything bad. So God bless them. True, during Amanda's pregnancy there was a misfortune. Her mother died. She was not really a woman of age, but she had been ill for a long time, and like many villagers, she did not go to the hospital. Her son-in-law did not fail here. He helped with the funeral, did everything by himself, because it was almost time for his wife to go to the maternity hospital. In fact, 40 days before the mother's death, Amanda was already taken to the maternity hospital in the district center because it turned out that her pregnancy was complicated, multiple pregnancies. There she soon gave birth to twins. This event was not the last one, because twins were not born in the village every year. That is why the young parents were congratulated, rejoiced, wished all the best. And everyone tried to do something to help, to give something nice and useful, not spared. After all, the mother kept the twins, gave birth. Tried to manage 2 children without mother's help. True, Oliver did not refuse, took care of the girls, loved his family. To all appearances, everyone could see that. I go out in the morning and he's hanging nappies in the yard. Everyone would have such a husband, said the nearest neighbor of the young. And so it was like that for a year and a half. No one could say anything bad about this family. True, those who were in closer contact with Oliver hinted that he dreamed of going to the city and even had some thoughts about what he would do there. But there was no talk of him leaving his wife and children here. So Amanda was again to be envied. The city would be urban, and the girls would grow up in the city too. Oliver really had such plans to go to the city and open a veterinary clinic there. Actually, he thought about it while studying at the institute. He did not abandon these plans, and even prepared the ground for leaving the village. Why did he move? Because he was not a city person from the beginning. He was born and lived in the same village, in a different neighborhood, of course. And his life there was not very good. His parents drank, respectively, and life was worse than ever. He rushed to the city to escape from them as soon as possible. In the city, he lived in a hostel, and after graduation, where to go? Only to rent a flat, spending all the money he never had. And where will he get the money from if he's just starting to work? And if he can find a job? So he went to the village, firstly, to save money, and secondly, to wait until the man who promised him assistance would retire. He had a distant relative, a lonely and somewhat strange man, but practical. He had his own small veterinary office, which he promised to give to the lad after he had gained experience. And so he had worked with animals for almost 3 years. The experience had been gained. The relative was about to retire. But now there was an obstacle to the fulfillment of this dream, namely his wife and daughters. The evil tongues were right. This marriage was accidental. Oliver and Amanda hadn't even met. They'd just seen each other a few times, and it had been a whirlwind. What was there to do? He was a young and lonely man, and just after graduating from college, he had split up with the girl he loved. That, Oliver realized, was to be expected. That girl, a fellow student, was not going to go to any village and wait for her lover to go to the mountain. Nor was she going to. Why should she? She had big plans and every chance of realizing them. And indeed, she had married before she graduated. Oliver was upset about it, and he didn't really care who was going to be around after his beloved Vanessa. He didn't even get a good look at Amanda. But she was pretty quiet, friendly. They met occasionally. Oliver had no plans for her. And then she comes in crying, pregnant. That's how they got married. He's not a scoundrel to abandon a pregnant girl. Of course, he would have left Amanda, even without much regret. But the daughters, Vanessa and Elsa, Amanda insisted that one of the daughters was called Elsa in honor of her mother, who died a month before the birth of her granddaughters. Oliver was against it. Well, who names a girl Elsa these days? What kind of name is that? If she had called her Stephanie, it would have been a collective farm. Indeed, this name seemed to him too simple, rustic. He never even called his wife Emmy, only Amanda. But then Amanda, usually pliant, looking up at him, suddenly snapped at him. I'd call her Stephanie if that was my mom's name. Besides, aren't we in the country? And so she did. One girl was named Vanessa, in honor of that unfulfilled love. Amanda never found out, of course. And the other became Elsa, in honor of her grandmother, who had worked in the collective farm all her life, and lost all her health on hard work, and lived to be just over 40. It was necessary to think of naming one's own daughter after a person with such a difficult fate. Because of that, Oliver had no love for one of his daughters. All hope was pinned on Vanessa. Maybe she would have a much better, happier fate. The girls were not twins, but twins. That is, they were not even identical. They resembled each other like sisters, but no more. Elsa, in everyone's opinion, was like her mother, light, smiling, blue-eyed. But Vanessa was born not like her mother, but not like her father either, with dark hair and brown eyes, and one eye was obviously darker than the other. That is an interesting girl with a twist, not like all the other children. When the girls learnt to walk, this difference became even more noticeable. Elsa, calm, cheerful, ran, tumbling on her slightly crooked legs, and all the time sang, or rather, mumbled some melody in her infantile language. Vanessa was quicker, skinnier, and didn't reach out to strangers. That was the reason why all the villagers always liked Elsa better. Whenever they saw her, everyone would stop and start fussing over the child. Oh, you're our bright little one. What a grandmother's granddaughter you are. That's a good thing your mum called you Elsa. We'll have Elsa again in our village. Vanessa, of course, was also noticed, but in passing. And I see that Daddy's assistant is growing up. Why are you running away? Don't be afraid. No one will touch you. But Vanessa didn't go to anyone. For some reason, everyone recognized her as Daddy's daughter. Maybe because they'd noticed that Oliver treated her better. And that's why they weren't particularly surprised when they talked about divorce and found out that Oliver would leave the village not alone, but would take only one daughter. Of course, Amanda was the first to know about it. when the girls were a year and a half old and it was time to put them in kindergarten, and she had to go to work on the farm, he immediately told her that he saw no point in their future life together. We need to get a divorce so that we don't have to suffer with alimony. Let's divide the children. Vanessa I'll take with me, and Elsa let her stay with you. Amanda was amazed at the very idea of divorce, although she felt that something had gone wrong in their life together. And then it turned out that her husband was going to take their daughter away. And she knew that Oliver did not throw words to the wind, decided, so will do. But at first the thought of possible separation from Vanessa had frightened her so much that she hadn't thought about divorce. What are you talking about? She said indignantly. Where is it seen that children are to be divided? I'm not giving up my daughter. And I'm not going to ask you. You think how you're going to be alone with 2 children. If you think I'll give up my divorce for that, you're wrong. I won't. I'll take my daughter, and you'll still be alone with the second one, and nobody owes anybody anything. And stop it, please. There's nothing terrible about what happened. I married you by accident. It was a mistake. And now I'm going to make up for that mistake. Amanda both cried and resisted as best she could, but what exactly could she do? On the one hand, Oliver seemed to be right. It would be harder for her with 2 daughters, and she really loved Elsa, not that she loved her more, but in a different way, not like Vanessa, and the girl was more attached to her. After all, Vanessa was indeed paternal. For the village, of course, this story became too much. Well, okay, people divorce, the husband goes to the city, so many people foresaw it, and now they had an excuse to say, well, we told you so, but to share the children. No, this has never been heard of here before. One child is taken away by his father, the other stays with his mother. It seems fair, but for a mother to give up her child, what kind of justice is that? The other daughter will stay with her. But we have not seen such stories in the village that a woman, even if she has many children, would give away one of 10 children somewhere on the side. No. This is something completely abnormal. It should not be. Even at the village council, the chairman said to Oliver, "Why do you leave Amanda here? Why don't you take her to town?" "We're divorced, in case you haven't noticed," Oliver replied defiantly. "Well, good, but why separate the children? That's no way to do business, especially since they're twins. Firstly, they're not twins, they're twins. That's a big difference. And secondly, what would be better if I left Amanda here with 2 kids? And naturally, we'll still see each other, and the girls will see each other. I'll still come here, and we're not talking about someone leaving anyone. We are divorced. It happens to people all the time," and he looked meaningfully at the chairman, who, incidentally, was also married for the second time. Hearing Oliver's reply, he sighed and agreed. "Well, your business, of course." Soon, Oliver packed up and left. Amanda had cried all her tears about the divorce even before that. But parting with her daughter, she couldn't stand it. She cried like a country girl. Looking at her mother, Elsa roared, reached out to her father and sister, but they paid no attention. Whether it was her father's influence, or whether she herself was so indifferent to her home, to her mother and sister. Vanessa didn't even look back at the places she was leaving. Maybe it's right that she's being taken away. People started talking. She's kind of soulless, just like a wolf cub. Well, don't speak ill of the child. She doesn't realize where they're taking her, and probably thinks they'll bring her back tomorrow. Others disagreed. Amanda is hard to understand anyway. Who'd have thought she'd be such a cuckoo? But why cuckoo? She's got her other daughter with her. Would you be willing to give one of them away to some unknown place? That's just it. But why unknown where? She's going with her father. She's going to be a city girl. I guess that's her fate. She's not from around here. Anyway, many people's opinion of Amanda changed for the worse at first. Indeed, not everyone would agree to give up their child. Maybe it was also because Amanda herself felt either guilty or just hard to deal with everything that had happened. Her husband left, took her daughter away, and she sort of gave her back. So from then on, she walked around as if she had been drowned in water, never looked up at people, as if she was ashamed of what had happened in her life. because of her own crying eyes. But time passed, the story was forgotten. Other events took place in the village, and people no longer mentioned every time that Amanda had abandoned her daughter, that her husband had left her. This is what happens in life, so why keep reminding the unhappy woman who was already suffering? Especially since her ex-husband apparently had a great life. He really managed to become the owner of a veterinary office, at first located in a one-room flat, where he lived with his daughter. The little girl gave her to a kindergarten, the most ordinary, and he himself worked trying to improve his situation, at first quite unenviable. A year later, he and his daughter came to the village to his ex-wife with their own car, a rather shabby, but still a foreign car, which was a novelty for the village, and proved that Oliver was not lost, and still in a lot up, and his daughter Vanessa was in good order. Elsa, of course, was not neglected, but she had a simpler dress and fewer toys. The girls themselves, who were not even 3 years old yet, didn't seem to care at all, but people noticed, and of course again began to discuss how lucky Vanessa was. Nobody called Elsa unhappy. What's the big deal? She lives with her mother. Her mother works, takes care of her daughter, and loves her. Oliver didn't stay with his relatives for long, and it was obvious that he didn't come without any particular desire, as if he were passing through. He'd only been here for a day. Amanda, seeing him off, cried she felt sorry for her daughter, whom she hadn't seen for a year, and asked him to come more often. But there was no more often. A businessman had no time to travel. And the next time he came only a few years later, when the girls were already going to school. True, Amanda herself went to the city a couple of times to visit her ex-husband, to look at Vanessa. But she didn't talk much about these visits, saying that everything was fine there. Everyone was healthy. Vanessa was in kindergarten, and Oliver was working. He hadn't married yet, and wasn't going to. She was reluctant to talk about it, and she was not so cheerful when she came back from the guests. Apparently it was a chilly welcome. But rumors were rife, so the villagers knew that Oliver was really doing well, and had more than one small office, and that the matter was much more serious, but nobody knew anything for sure. True, it was noted that Amanda had gone there with a sack of village gifts and returned with one doll for her daughter. Didn't she buy it herself? Of course you expect gifts from these businessmen if they would die for a penny. You yourself would probably eat her buttered chickens for the love of it, people speculated. They learnt very little when Oliver arrived with his girlfriend and daughter. He had a bigger, more expensive, newer foreign car. He looked more respectable himself, and his daughter was dressed up like a doll. Amanda was, of course, happy for her daughter, who had a much wider smile of happiness than Elsa. It was a shame for Elsa, and Vanessa had become much more of a stranger. Elsa met her sister much more welcoming, pleased with her, wanted to talk about something. But Vanessa looked at her sister's toys and her preparations for school with feigned bewilderment. Is that what you're going to do with that backpack? That's a waste. They don't wear those nowadays. I have a much more interesting one. It's a pity I didn't bring it. I would have shown you how to do it. Have you got your school uniform yet? A backpack is just like a backpack. Many of us have them. Only the color is different. And we don't have uniforms at school. It just says what is definitely not allowed. That's all, Elsa answered, offended by her sister's inattention and words. And the one did not think to stop with adult contempt. Well, yes, in the village, of course, everything is simpler than in our town. If you go out in a dress like yours, people will laugh. And Mum doesn't dress well at all. I can see why Daddy didn't want to live with her. He has acquaintances now. You know what they are like. Just like in the cinema. Elsa took offense, but Vanessa continued. As a result, no communication between the sisters was not possible, which made their mother very sad, and she was even glad that they came for a short time. After their departure, it turned out that Elsa, too, was pleased with the departure of her father, whom she did not call in any way, and did not want to communicate with him at all. It's good that they've gone, isn't it, Mum? She said afterwards, except don't lie. What are you saying? It's your sister. You're not used to Dad, obviously, and he's a stranger to you. But Vanessa is the one you need to talk to. You're adults. You'll be going to school soon. You can write to each other. talk on the phone. I mean, it's really nice to have a sibling. Yeah, but she's so imaginative, and I don't want to talk to her. I'd rather she didn't come. She's been saying all sorts of nasty things about how we dress differently, and our house isn't like this. Well, it's understandable. She's not used to this kind of life. You saw that they have a flat with all the comforts, didn't you? Of course, she doesn't like it here very much. So let her stay with her own comforts, Elsa replied. She would like to be friends with her sister, and she was not averse to being proud of her father, who has such a car, such a suit, and he himself is also representative. But it was very disrespectful to talk about her mother in her home, and for her there was no one and nothing better. The communication between the former spouses, however, soon came to nothing. Oliver did not really want to come, they had no time to travel, so there were almost no meetings. Amanda realized that, most likely, her ex-husband had found another wife, and she had probably become a mother to Vanessa. It hurt to think about it, but what could be done? She could only be glad that she had another daughter, Elsa. In general, life went on and on, past offenses forgotten under the weight of daily problems. Oliver gave less and less information about himself and his daughter. Amanda had taught herself that it was for the best. If they're not talking, they're doing fine. Isn't it? They probably are. And then she married a local man, a tractor driver. He was also divorced. His wife ran away to town, like someone was luring her, and Bill was expecting her to come back for a while. But it turned out that she wasn't. She wasn't going to come back, and was living in the city with her new husband, to whom she had already had 2 children. That's what he suggested. And do not start a life together. Why live alone? We got together, got married. We lived, in general, quite well for a few years. They didn't talk about love, but they lived in harmony. Bill treated her and Elsa well. That is, it could be said that a few years after the divorce, the woman was still lucky. Oliver, when he learnt about it, said that since it was so, he would not come here anymore, and he was not going to bring Vanessa to this nest of debauchery either. Apparently he was hurt that his Amanda had found her happiness. She just waved her hand. It was a pity that Elsa had lost all ties with her sister. It was no good. But the girl was not upset, because she was embarrassed by these meetings with her sister, who the further she went, the more she boasted of her good city life, her outfits, and so on. On the last visit of her relatives, Elsa even left home, told her mom she would stay at her friend's house for the time being. But what about it? What am I going to tell my father? Amanda was upset. Whatever you want to say. Tell him I've gone to a holiday resort, replied Elsa. Amanda, of course, did not lie like that. She said that her daughter was in a pioneer camp and threw the photo from the real resort, which Vanessa had exhibited, into the oven. There was no need to upset Elsa once again, though she hoped, of course, that someday the sisters would reconcile and be truly kindred people. What can one do if their lives are so different? That's why for a long time she knew nothing about Vanessa. Elsa, having finished school, left for the district center. Mother does not stay alone, but with her husband. Let them live together in peace. And she, Elsa, decided to get some other speciality. She was not going to become a milkmaid. Amanda herself discouraged her from it. She knew how hard such work was, and things in the collective farm were not very good, so it was not sure that this farm would last long. Elsa decided to study to become a kindergarten teacher and enrolled in a pedagogical school. There was no dormitory, she had to rent a room, and at weekends she often came home to visit her mother. But fate was still not spared, only she had arranged her personal life with Bill, as he died in a fire at the tractor station. She was devastated, her heart began to ache, her blood pressure was skyrocketing. She could hardly work. She had to transfer from milkmaid to the office as a bookkeeper. Elsa understood that it was very difficult for her mum, so she decided to return to the village. And don't make things up, my daughter. How will you come back without finishing your studies? You'll remain without education, Amanda discouraged her. It's okay, people live without education, she reassured her daughter. In fact, she decided to return not only because of her mother. She started a romance in the district center, but nothing happened there. The man whom she already considered her fiancé, Elsa, abandoned and went to another, who probably had more tempting prospects. She hadn't told her mother about it, but Amanda herself guessed it all from her daughter's unhappy look. And what is it? She thought sometimes, listening at night to Elsa sobbing in her room. The daughter has the same fate as me. It will seem that I, because of my mother, received no education, and so will she. But also in her private life, from the looks of it, nothing good is going to happen. I wonder how Vanessa's doing. She's probably doing fine. If she was bad, she'd come to her mother to complain. Or does she no longer consider me a mother? Such thoughts made her aching heart even more distressed. But she hid the deterioration of her health, did not tell her daughter anything. And one morning she just didn't wake up. Her torn heart had stopped. Oliver at the funeral of his ex-wife did not come, referring to the busyness. And Vanessa came alone. But everyone around her had the impression that she came not so much to say goodbye to her mother, as just to show off in front of her fellow villagers. The girl, already a student of the institute, drove up to the gate of her native house in her own car. She got out, stood there, as if not knowing what to do next, and giving everyone an opportunity to examine herself. She really looked splendid, in a little black dress that emphasized her chiseled figure, with modestly combed dark hair, pale with a tragic expression on her face and a lace handkerchief clasped in her hand. She took a large bouquet of burgundy roses out of the car. She walked slowly into the house, where an open coffin stood on a stool. She came over and bent over the face of the deceased, and all present at this scene speculated for a long time afterwards. Had she even touched her mother's forehead with her lips? No, she didn't even think about it. And as her lips were painted, even at the funeral she couldn't resist. It's not for us to judge her. She hasn't even seen her mother in years. Others tried to justify her. Those who hadn't seen the squeamish grimace Vanessa couldn't hide. Straightening up, she quickly came to her senses, put her handkerchief to her face, and turned to her bitterly weeping sister. "Here we are, you and I alone, without Mum," she exclaimed sadly, lightly putting her arm around her sister's shoulders and kissing the air picturesquely a few centimeters from Elsa's face swollen with tears. Her sister saw the falsity and pulled away slightly, but said nothing, only stroked Vanessa's shoulder. She was not at all interested in the feelings of this well-groomed girl, who happened to be her own sister. Now the difference between the girls was enormous, and they could not be taken for sisters, just two young people from completely different worlds. Having flaunted herself and cried at the cemetery and sat at the table with everyone, Vanessa didn't know what to do. She was tired of playing the grief-stricken daughter, and what else to do in the village just could not imagine. It was inconvenient to leave at once, and she did not want to grieve further, and to be in some wilderness among strangers who do not so much admire her as to remember the deceased. It was just uncomfortable. But from the institute on the eve of the session, she asked off just for the funeral of her mother, so she turned right at the memorial table to the chairman, who was also present at the wake. "You as an official can give me a certificate or a copy of the death certificate. I need to present it to the institute, or they won't believe it." "Yes, of course," said the chairman. "And by the way, as an official, I'll tell you at once, girls, it's sort of early now, but since one of the sisters is leaving soon, you'd better find out at once, or you'll agree how you're going to live here. Did your mother leave a will?" Elsa was a little moved by this message. She was exhausted by the funeral, had shed many tears, and knew very well that there was nothing to bequeath to her mother. She thought that Mum had just left some kind of letter to address them. But Vanessa, who knew nothing about her mother's condition, was wary, of course. Here were her village relatives living practically in poverty, from her point of view. But how to know? Maybe her mother was saving up something. Or did she have some inherited good jewelry, gold coins? She must have left most of it to her sister, but she should have something too. She was her own blood after all. And the chairman took a leaf out of his pocket and read, "You understand she had no great wealth, and she was not legally savvy." She wrote as best she could. And here is what she wrote. "I bequeath all movable property, things and a cow to my daughter Elsa, and immovable property, a house and a plot of land in the village of Vozvizenka, to my second daughter Vanessa. So here, girls, see for yourselves how you will deal with it now. That is, you, Vanessa can move here. You can do something else. And you, Elsa, have everything in the house, plus the cow. The sisters sat with their mouths open. Both were somewhat disappointed. Vanessa was disappointed that her mother had no wealth, and Elsa could not understand what her mother had done. Where would she go now with this cow, which had been limping on one leg lately? Of course, the cow is very good, quite young, nothing to say, and this leg most likely can be healed. But where will she live? In an empty field with this cow. The guests were also perplexed by this last will of the deceased. They dispersed, and the girls were left alone. What a trick her mother pulled. I don't know about you, but I didn't expect it at all. I'm a landlady now, Vanessa grinned. I guess you are. Are you going to kick me out? Elsa also asked with a chuckle. I don't make it up. Why would I need this wreck? Especially since you'll have nowhere to live. This house, even if you sell it, you won't have enough money for petrol to get to your village. Live like you've been living, and come and visit sometime. Relatives, after all. Vanessa, who was rather amused by the announcement of this will, left. Elsa was left alone. She looked at her mother's portrait with the black ribbon and couldn't understand why her mother had done that. Perhaps you hoped in this way that my sister and I would become closer to each other. Oh, Mum, how ridiculous is that? It was just ridiculous to think of Vanessa coming and living in our house. I'm certainly not afraid that she'll decide to kick me out and, say, sell the house, though she's probably wrong about its value. I'm more afraid of my father, no matter what you say. And he's a greedy man, and even a little money can be very tempting to him. And who knows? What if he wants to dispose of this unfortunate dwelling in his own way? No, he probably won't. But still. Or did you want to make it up to Vanessa with that will? I mean, you always seem to feel guilty about giving one of us away. Well, that's wrong too. It's not your fault. I hope you didn't mean to hurt me either and hope my sister wouldn't leave me homeless. But that's pretty much what happened. Vanessa just laughed at your will. And then she left. And I kind of kept my interest in my cow. Oh, the cow's got to be sorted out too. What's wrong with her leg? A cow for any mistress is not just an animal, she becomes a native being, a nurse, a conversationalist. That's why Elsa was not going to leave her and her mother Vesna, a white cow with red spots. After all, it was she who had such a growth on her neck after her mother's death, and the cow seemed to sympathize with her sincerely. And now she had hurt her leg. And Elsa herself, of course, could not understand what had happened. She should have called a vet. She remembered her father again. He was busy. He couldn't come to his wife's funeral. But maybe he could have looked at Vesna's leg at the same time. Though it is unlikely, he treats pedigree dogs and cats in the city, but he doesn't remember how to approach a cow. There was a veterinarian in their village who had been working after my father for many years, an experienced man who knew cattle well. But now he was away, treating animals in some distant villages. When he returned, Elsa turned to him, and the vet did not refuse. He came, examined her, said the cow had hurt her hoof. He dealt with it quite easily. He washed the sore limb, applied a bandage with some ointment, and very soon the cow was fine. And not just fine, soon Vesna became a real breadwinner. Elsa never went to work on the farm. She hoped that someday she would finish her studies and get a profession. But until that happened, she needed something to live on. Elsa decided to live by subsistence farming. She had a good vegetable garden, chickens, and the cow got well. She became very good again. So Elsa started to go to the motorway to sell milk and other products. She needed money to continue her studies, but also to repair the house, because it was still strong, but it needed repair. And she couldn't do it on her own. The business of selling milk, butter, and sour cream went well. People appreciated her conscientiousness and the quality of her products, and began to come to her house. Elsa rejoiced at her success and hoped that she would soon raise the necessary amount of money. One day, when she was standing on the motorway, a man in an expensive car stopped near her. He approached her, took aim, and decided to buy everything he had at once. Why do you want so much at once? You'd better come here more often. I stand here almost every day, and I can give you the address. Come straight to the house. Elsa was pleased. Well, that's an option too. Do you have anything else besides milk? I'm not just for myself, I have workers, so I try to feed them well. In the shops, it's more expensive, and you can never be sure of the quality. I have everything that grows in the vegetable garden: potatoes, cucumbers, and other vegetables of all kinds. I have pickles. By the way, I'll gladly sell you some if you need it. I still have some left. No, it's all good, don't think so. It's just that I'm used to doing a lot of it alone. You can't eat it all. How do you manage such a household, living alone? No husband, no brother. No, the man wondered. It's the way I'm used to it. We're country people. We live and work that way. It's not that hard. I used to live with my mom. Now I'm alone. I have a sister, but she lives in the city. Elsa wondered why she was talking to a complete stranger. But somehow he had a way with her. And to be honest, she liked him. She was glad when he took the address and soon came to buy groceries from her and talk to her again. Turns out he's single too. True, he has a small daughter, but his wife is gone. She left, leaving him with the baby. And he himself has a small but very successful business, which he is also engaged in, as used to alone. That's how their relationship began. Meetings started, and love flared up. Elsa, how long are we going to meet like this, like schoolboys? Let's move to my place in the city. Let's get married and live as a family, Andrew once suggested to her. Wow, let's get married right away, she smiled. No, I have nothing against it, of course. It's just kind of unexpected. And I don't want to move to the city either. Forgive me. I tried to live there, but I didn't like it. And now I have a household, a cow I can't leave for one day. I have no one to leave it with. You'd better come to my place with your daughter. We'll get acquainted. You'll have a rest. Take a walk in the fresh air. Look how nice it is here. What city can replace that? Andrew agreed, though he hadn't thought about moving to the village yet. He had things to do in the city, too, and had no one to leave them to. And it had to happen that on the day Andrew and his daughter Kelly arrived in the village, Vanessa showed up. She needed some documents, so she decided to visit her sister. Elsa was happy to have so many people in her house for once. She set the table, talked to the little girl, asked her sister how she was doing in the city. And suddenly she realized that no one was really listening to her, because Andrew and Vanessa were having a different conversation, and they communicate not with words, but with looks, smiles, and fleeting touches. And they understand each other perfectly. Vanessa, always so disgruntled and gloomy when she arrived in the village, was unrecognizable. She was cheerful, lively, her eyes shining. It didn't take any discernment to realize that she was trying to impress the man she liked, and not just to impress, but to arouse in him stronger feelings. Elsa realized that, and when Andrew came out, she asked her sister bluntly, "I take it you liked him. Why wouldn't I? Or do you really want him?" The sister replied defiantly. "But actually, he and I are already in a relationship." "That's sad," Elsa said. "Sister, judge for yourself. Why would you want him? You live in the country, he's in the city. Well, you're not going to move in with each other, I take it. You're not going to visit each other all your lives. He has a daughter, by the way. She needs her mother. I know what it's like to live without a mother, even with the most loving father. And you're just going to stay Aunt Elsa? No. If you're serious about him, I won't get in the way. It just seemed to me that you were just having fun like that." "What fun? You haven't forgotten that we're 25 soon. My father's been hinting to me for a long time that it's time to get married, and I don't really mind. And this is quite an option." And Elsa decided not to waste time on useless clarification of relations. When Vanessa with Andrew and Kelly left at the same time, she did not delay and reproach anyone, and even showed how painful it was. Maybe this man would indeed make up her own sister's happiness. And if so, why should she get in their way? And Vanessa really had the most serious plans. When she arrived in town, she immediately invited Andrew home and introduced him to her father. Oliver, having learnt through his channels about the business of his daughter's new friend, immediately told her, "Well, look, you have a serious man. He is not just a business, he is the director of the bank. And it's high time you got married. How long are you going to be a girl? You'll finally get off my neck. and I'll be able to live in peace. Oh, Dad, tell me, when have I ever stopped you from living? Vanessa was indignant. But, having secured the support of his father, began to give Andrew more and more confidently to understand that she is very much not against becoming his wife, and soon she was able to tell her sister that her wedding was coming up. Elsa, of course, was happy for her sister, but she cried a little about herself, but not much. After all, she could not be said to be so seriously in love with Andrew. It was just that he seemed to her a reliable, decent man to live with. And suddenly, she sighed as her mother had once sighed, "What can you do?" So it was fate. But it turned out that her fleeting romance was not without a trace. Soon after she learned of her sister's impending wedding, she realized she was pregnant. That could have changed the case. But Elsa decided she would stay out of it. She refused to go to the wedding and decided not to tell Andrew or Vanessa anything. She decided she'd be a single mom, that's all. Not a bad option either, she wouldn't be living alone after all. After all, her mom raised her without any help. She and the baby won't be lost. Yes, she never got an education, she has no reliable profession that gives a stable income, but she is young, healthy, and already loves her child. It was impossible to hide from her fellow villagers the fact that she was not married and was expecting a baby. Rumors started to spread. "Here you are. Such a modest, decent. What have you done?" shook their heads neighbors. As she was left without a mother, so she went, standing on the motorway. I knew it wouldn't end well. Where is it seen that a young, beautiful girl stands selling groceries? It's more like a woman's face. Someone must have cheated her. This relationship with those who go out with the right and left. He's one of those. But as the years go by, they don't marry. At least she'll have a child now. How will she manage on her own? If only her father or sister could help her. Keep your pocket wide open. You don't see that father around here anymore. He hasn't helped the little girl either. He'd come once a year, slip in a penny, and that's all the help he needed. And now he's probably forgotten her name. He didn't even come to bury his wife. And what to say about his sister? Have we seen that sister? And Elsa herself did not hope for any relatives. She felt no particular resentment towards her sister because of Andrew. Firstly, they knew nothing. And secondly, Vanessa, her own sister, and she wished her only happiness. And since she decided to handle it on her own, that was the way to do it. And she continued to go to the motorway with her groceries, diligently saving money. Now it was no longer for her studies, but for her child's upbringing. However, it was getting harder every day. The pregnancy was making itself felt. She didn't go to her sister's wedding, but she received a parcel in which Vanessa sent photos from her gorgeous wedding and a gift for reconciliation, a beautiful jumper. Elsa responded with a cheerful congratulations and thanked for the present, which in the current situation could not even try on. Admired the beauty of the bride and groom almost sincerely. She was not envious. And since she had decided not to be angry with her sister, she wasn't. Everyone has their own destiny, after all. One evening, as she was walking home after milking the cow, she was stopped by a man's voice. "Let me have some milk." Elsa looked round in surprise and froze, putting the pail of milk on the ground. A rather scary-looking man was looking at her from behind a lilac bush. He was dressed in some tattered cotton box, his face maybe and not scary in normal condition. But now, overgrown with a beard almost to his eyes, it was frightening. She became so uncomfortable that she couldn't even scream. "Who are you, excuse me?" she asked in a half-whisper. "Just saw you coming. Smelled the milk, too." Couldn't resist. "Sorry if I scared you." He saw Elsa's big belly and was probably really ashamed that he had scared her. "Who the hell are you?" Already a little calmer, Elsa asked. "Would you like to buy milk?" "I'd buy a lot of things." "Not on a budget right now," the man grinned. And Elsa said, unexpectedly to herself, "Let's go into the house. I'll pour you a mug there," and went up on the porch, perplexed. Who am I taking into the house? Badhead. He's a real bandit. The child in her belly stirred, either frightened or approving of her actions. In the house she did pour the stranger a large mug of milk, cut off a piece of cabbage pie. "Help yourself. Who are you? You never told me." But the man ate and drank greedily. It was obvious he was hungry, and Elsa got cold feet again. "Don't be afraid," said the guest at last. "I don't hurt anyone, and I'm not a bandit at all. Though, to be honest, I escaped from prison." She sank down on the stool like that, dumbfounded by this confession. "Well, thank you, I'm relieved," was all Elsa could mutter. "Don't be afraid," the man reassured her again. "I'm not a gangster, honestly, and I wasn't in jail for robbery or murder. I just didn't have the strength to be there. That's one. And two, this is the only way I can prove my innocence. And by the way, I still have a little daughter. At least for her sake, I have to do my best. Do you live alone?" How could I live alone when there's a lot of people around? Some of the neighbors must have seen you by now. And when they've seen you, they've drawn their own conclusions. You don't look like a heroic lover. So, most likely, someone has already run for the police officer. Elsa's voice was trembling, but she still tried not to show her fear, and on the contrary, to show this man that she was not going to become an easy prey. "I hope you won't give me away," he said. "But even if I don't, are you going to live here all your life with me, or run around somewhere?" "I've already said, I need to find proof of my innocence. There is such proof. Only I have to get to town. And me, you see," he pointed with his hand at his clothes. "All this is touching, of course. Only I haven't got men's clothes or a razor to make you look human. I don't even have the money to dress you decently either. I understand and I don't ask, but at least let me stay with you tonight. Honestly, I'm exhausted." Elsa saw how tired the man was and made a bed for him in the far room, that is, in a small pantry where all sorts of junk was usually kept. She sat down and thought. It could not be said that she believed this stranger so much. That is, that he had escaped from prison. She did, for the prison was not so far from their village. Prisoners had escaped in the past. Now one of them had stumbled upon her. And of course he's the innocent victim, looking to prove a point. That was hard to believe. Elsa knew, ask any prisoner, and he would say that he was in prison because of the intrigues of some ill-wishers. Well, however, she's not a judge or an investigator. She invited a man in, fed him, put him to bed. One can only hope she doesn't stab him. Otherwise. So she finished all her evening chores without much worry and went to bed. In the morning, the neighborhood policeman still came to see her, but not because someone had reported about the visitor, but just went and questioned everyone. The news about the escaped prisoner had already reached their station. "Hello, Elsa. Grief has come upon our village, as they say. An escaped convict is somewhere in our neighborhood, I am not mistaken. Have you seen any strangers lately?" he asked. "No, I haven't seen any," replied Elsa calmly. "I've been minding my own business, no time to look at either acquaintances or strangers." "That's good, of course. But look, it's no joke. There's a fugitive bandit loose somewhere in our neighborhood. So don't go out much in the evening, and don't go out early in the morning," warned the neighborhood policeman. "I have my cows to milk," she grinned. That was the end of the conversation. It was difficult to suspect the girl of harboring an escaped prisoner. The policeman did not think of examining her home. When she entered the house, she saw her guest standing in the doorway with a painfully tense face. He had heard the whole conversation and realized that Elsa had no intention of giving him away. "Thank you. We haven't even met, by the way. My name is James." "Nice to meet you. I'm Elsa," she replied. "You don't worry, Elsa. I'll be gone soon." "Is that policeman of yours going to be around the village for long?" "I'm sorry, I didn't ask, but I think a long time. I mean, he's going round interviewing everyone. Who's seen who, who's talked to who. What I said you heard, but with others it may be longer. There are such amateurs, how they will start to tell where they saw something suspicious. I hope, if anyone saw our acquaintance, I won't be judged too severely for concealment." "No, of course not. I'll say I threatened you with a weapon of some kind. Really, I have nothing." "All right, stay with me a little longer. What can I do? Maybe he'll be gone by evening. It'll be dark then. In the meantime, at least get some rest, get some sleep. How long are you going to run?" "As long as it takes. Maybe you could give me some scissors too. I'll at least trim my beard." So the fugitive stayed at Elsa's house. She had not only scissors, but even some old razor. And he got rid of his beard without cutting himself and turned out to be quite a young man. Elsa decided not to go anywhere, stayed with her guest for the time being. And what were the two of them to do? Only talk. The girl told why she lived alone, and he about how he found himself in such a position. I was actually doing business, but also interfered with someone. That is, I know perfectly well to whom, and there is evidence of my non-involvement. But it is necessary to get to them. I hid my documents in the city in a locker. No one can touch them there. I don't want to go back to prison, especially since they'll add time to my sentence for escape. But if you have proof, you can take it out of your stash and show it to the investigators. That's easy for me to say. I doubt very much I'll be allowed to do that. I'm planning to fight some pretty serious mates. I've got to get out. Not even for my own sake. If I were alone, I'd do my time. But I have a daughter, only 5 years old. She's an orphan. My wife died in childbirth and I have no relatives. So they put her in an orphanage. What about her now? I just don't know. If I can justify myself, I'll find her, of course, and take her away. And if I stayed in jail, I'd be out only in 5 years, and even then under the most favorable circumstances. So my daughter would be 10 years old by now. And I don't know if she'd recognize me and forgive me. James stayed with Elsa that day and the next, and she saw that the policeman continued to walk around the village. Some more policemen had arrived. Could it be that someone had actually seen the fugitive here? It was simply dangerous for him to go out now. Their long conversations made her not only sympathize with the man in trouble, but also believe that he wasn't lying. She would have been glad to help, but she was in such a position herself that it was simply difficult to make unnecessary movements. Still, when James couldn't go outside on the third day either, Elsa made up her mind. I'll tell you what, you can't hide like this for long anyway. Let's do it this way. I'll go to town, get your papers, and then you can do what you need to do with them. And isn't that going to be too hard for you? James asked, looking at her large belly. Time permitting for now. I hope I don't give birth on the way, Elsa assured him. And she did indeed drive into town without difficulty, picked up her file folder in the luggage room, and headed home. But when she arrived, she didn't find James there. It turned out that he had been taken away. A neighbor had informed her of this. Oh, Elsa, where are you walking? You have no idea what was here. The police were walking around our village, and they found the fugitive. And do you know where? In your yard. What nonsense. I had no one there. I was at home all the time. I only left yesterday. I had to go to town. You see, to get the papers, Elsa froze with horror. Well, and yesterday he saw that the yard was empty, and he crawled into a shed somewhere like he was hiding. He's been wandering around the house too. Mrs. Jenny came to milk your freckles, and she saw a strange man step into the barn, and the neighborhood officer had warned everyone. But why are you turning green? You had nothing to do with it. You weren't there. Go into the house, see if he's done anything wrong. They'll come to you, of course, and ask you what's going on. Was he not killed at least? Elsa asked, really pale with fear for her acquaintance. No, he's alive, he surrendered quietly. There was no shooting, no blood. Don't worry. The cops came, put his hands behind his back and into the car. So your house didn't seem to be damaged. There were no dead people there for sure. The police did come round, said they had arrested the man who had broken into her house, asked her if anything was missing. Of course, nothing was missing. Left alone, Elsa closed the door, sat down by the table, and thought about what she should do now. She really wanted to help this man. It was good that she had the documents in hand. But was there any point in taking them to the police? Wouldn't that do more harm than good? She opened James's folder and began to read, increasingly horrified and bewildered by how complicated everything in life was. It turned out that James had been set up by Andrew, the same banker who had fathered her child and was now her sister's husband. If she goes to the police, she will unwittingly hurt Vanessa and her. Elsina's actions could be interpreted as revenge. But she cannot go, because she now knows the truth and must help James, who trusted her. The case was sent for review, and soon James was released, and Andrew was detained. During all these proceedings, Elsa managed to give birth to a baby boy. Vanessa was left alone, but survived it quite easily, because her father was rich, and she never fell in love with Andrew. You could think about settling a new personal life, and she immediately filed for divorce. Kelly turned out to be James' daughter. Andrew took her from the orphanage and deceived her into guardianship, hoping in case of anything to get the inheritance. Vanessa was indifferent to children and gave the girl with visible relief. She and the news that Elsa had a son, that is, her nephew, took without interest. Several years passed after all these events. James, acquitted, rid of all false accusations, immediately returned to Elsa. It turned out not just to thank her for saving him. He confessed that he had fallen in love with her. "But I have a child with your enemy, by the way. And there's still no telling what will happen when this Andrew guy gets free. And what might be. I'll adopt the child, that's all. I have a daughter too, by the way. Don't forget that. I do know her, don't I? Kelly and I became friends when she came round. And I hope it doesn't freak you out that I have a kid. See, why should your son be an obstacle for me? Wait a minute, though. I haven't asked the most important thing. Do you agree to be my wife?" Elsa agreed. She, too, had realized that she was attracted to this man when he came to her house. Soon they were married. He adopted a child, and Elsa adopted his daughter. James took back the bank, convinced his wife that she needed to move to the city, to use her maternity leave to get an education. Think what it would be like. A banker's wife living in the countryside, tending cattle and selling milk on the motorway, he said. And Elsa agreed after all. Indeed, at least for the sake of children, she should have changed her life. But only the house is a pity. I cannot sell it. After all, according to the documents, it belongs to my sister, Vanessa, of course, and will not think of going to the village. And a house that no one wants will quickly fall into disrepair, she said regretfully. And why sell it? We have the money now. We can repair it and use it as a summer house. Perhaps your sister will come there then too? Elsa was not wrong about that. Vanessa, without much worrying about the divorce from Andrew, not that let herself go to all the wrong things, she just continued her wild life. Despite the fact that she had graduated from college, she was not going to work, hoping to live happily on her father's money. Oliver could not refuse anything to his daughter, whom he used to consider the only one, although sometimes tired of her antics, which were forgivable only for a teenage girl, said to Vanessa. "I don't make me think I've chosen the wrong daughter." To this, Vanessa defiantly replied, "And you try to trade up. From what I understand, it's going great. She'll be a worthy daughter for you." "That's nonsense," the father said angrily. "Don't you think I'm eternal? I've been to the doctor. They say serious heart and vascular problems. And I wasn't afraid for myself, but for you. How will you live when you're alone?" "Oh, don't be so frightened. You'll live and live. At least you have to marry me off to a good man. I'm still watching." "Don't you think?" laughed the daughter, not taking her father's words about health seriously at all. But he was not joking and was seriously worried about his daughter's future. "You're looking, but I don't see what you're looking at yet. I haven't seen any good men who'd be willing to marry a beautiful dummy." "Well, thank you, Daddy. You have a good opinion of me," Vanessa took offense, not thinking of correcting herself. However, her father's warnings turned out to be not an empty sound. Oliver died suddenly, leaving everything to his only daughter Vanessa, without even mentioning Elsa in his will. However, it was Elsa and her husband who had to bury him. Vanessa could only sob and wring her hands, showing her inconsolable grief. Elsa tried to calm her sister, to make her believe that she was an adult and should live on her own without doing anything stupid. But she doubted very much that her sister perceived her words. And so it came to pass. Vanessa's grief passed very quickly. And since she had never been particularly practical, she could not work and was not going to. She squandered her fortune quite quickly and ended up with nothing. Where was she supposed to go after that? Only to her sister. Of course, the only person who could, if not help financially, then at least sympathizes. Elsa, already working in the credit department of her husband's bank, received her sister very cordially. She did not remember any past offenses and knew only that she had to help a person who had nothing and no one left. Now it was as if they had switched roles. Elsa was a successful, happy woman in her personal life, and Vanessa needed help. Her sister didn't refuse her, helping her with her job and some other problems. But about the fact that I'm not going to support you all the time, I tell you at once. You are a grown-up, educated woman. You should think about your own life. You have a flat, a job, all the conditions for a normal existence. Even a house in the village. If you haven't forgotten, I remember everything, said Vanessa, who seemed to be only now beginning to grow up. I'm very grateful to you, and I'll try not to ruin my life completely. Meanwhile, Andrew, having served his time, was released. He was given a short sentence and served it without much trouble. But when he got out, he realized that it would not be easy to start all over again. He tried to appeal to his ex-wife, hoping that if she could not help, then at least support him. But he received such a fierce rebuff that he realized that he could not achieve anything else here. But then what to do? He was not used to work. He had to invent some new schemes that would help him to get on with his life. When he learned that Elsa had a son by him, he decided to restore his paternal rights. But it turned out that Elsa, like Vanessa, wasn't going to have anything more to do with him. "What son, Andrew?" she asked. "My boy has a father, and it's not you." "What kind of father is he?" "An adopted one. I have the right to raise my child myself. I'll sue you. And you won't get away with it. At least you'll be obliged to ensure our communication." And he kept his promise and sued. But what could he hope for? Lonely, convicted, without a job, a stable income, or even a place of his own. He hoped, to be honest, that Elsa and her husband would decide to pay him off with a tidy sum. But no, he didn't scare anyone. He couldn't prove anything. And so he left the courthouse, deprived of his last hope. The child was left with his parents, whom he considered his own and the only ones. And Andrew was forbidden even to see him. The pre-dawn light played with the young emerald green of the forest that spread out on both sides of the track. The good road surface clung perfectly to the tires. The car flew along the deserted road at this hour without obstacles. She would arrive home even faster than expected. Beatrice was completely satisfied with life. The day had ended marvelously. She had concluded a profitable contract. She had managed even faster and better than she had expected. And now she was going home, humming a little tune to herself. She had a substantial amount of money with her in a suitcase. One might well say that it was madness to carry such sums around unguarded. But Beatrice didn't think so. Firstly, no one knew that she would be traveling with that kind of money. And secondly, she wasn't on a bus, she was in a car. So who could get the money out of her? She didn't know whether she was going on this business trip or not, whether she was going to come back with a win or a loss. And that's how good it turned out. How could she not sing? Suddenly her car stumbled on the smooth road. She pulled to the side of the road, slowed down. A punctured tire, apparently. There's no way everything's going to be fine. Something is bound to ruin the holiday, she thought. She got out of the car, walked around it, and saw that the matter was much more serious. Both front wheels were punctured. But why? How could this happen? She walked around the car and noticed that the puncture was no accident. There were some thorns lying on the road, which she had run over. Beatrice barely had time to pull out her phone before 3 men came out of the woods, and it was obvious from their faces that they weren't going to help at all. They probably had very different goals in mind. "Good afternoon, madam," one said with a mocking tone. "Would you like to help? We are not mechanics, but to relieve you of some extra weight is quite." "Stop talking," interrupted the other older bandit, and turned to Beatrice. "Give me the phone. Then you'll be making small talk." She realized that she could not get rid of these scoundrels, and she was glad to lose some of her possessions, but to keep the main thing, and her life, of course. And so, wishing to calm them down, she gave the phone without talking and added, "I have everything I have in my purse there in the salon, and turned to go to the car, but her way was blocked. "We'll take the purse, don't worry," said the ringleader, apparently. "But the main thing is that suitcase." "No, that's not mine," exclaimed Beatrice in despair, realizing that she was about to lose everything. "It's clear it's not yours," the gray man grinned, and a blow fell on Beatrice's head. The world plunged into darkness. She woke up in the twilight and did not immediately remember what had happened. One thing she realized at once: she was in the forest, sitting with her back to a tree, and she couldn't move because she was tied up. That is, she was in a completely helpless position, unable to move her arms or legs. She had obviously been dragged far from the road because there was no clearance between the trees, and there's hardly any human traffic, so she had a good chance of dying right here from hunger, cold, thirst. The mosquitoes had already gathered for a feast. Screaming is probably useless, but what to do? And at the same time, she sensed that she was not alone here. Someone was nearby, and that someone was hardly in a kindly mood towards her. Beatrice heard a low but threatening growl, and clearly not just one living creature, for the growl seemed to come from all directions at once. "My God," she whispered in a pitifully trembling voice. How on earth could this have happened to her? After all, not long ago she had been perfectly happy and content with her life, and now she seemed to be devoured by some beasts. She looked into the bushes growing around her and saw some terrible lights. They were the eyes of wolves, and there were at least 3 of them. What wolves do in the forest with people is unknown. So she, a recently successful businesswoman, would become just fodder for wild animals. Well, maybe it's better this way. She won't have to die a long and painful death tied to a tree. This hopelessness made her head swim. Beatrice felt like she was about to pass out. I hope they don't eat people who are already dead. Besides, they don't seem to be showing any aggression. Maybe these wolves have already eaten something else. A hare, squirrels. I don't know. Some sheep stolen. What the hell is going on in my head? She thought. And suddenly she heard a human voice. The strangest thing was that it was clearly not the voice of an adult, but of a child. Akila, Alba. What did you find there? Come here. The boy clearly called out to the wolves. Or was it dogs after all? Beatrice turned her head, as far as she could, at the sound of footsteps and saw what appeared from behind the bushes was indeed a child. A boy of about 8, small but dressed like a real hunter, in a camouflage-colored uniform. But she apparently mistook the dogs for wolves, and the boy with his parents came, probably to hunt. So there was hope of rescue. "Hey boy," she called out to him. "Help me, please. Where are your parents?" "Oh," said the boy. "Who tied you up? Are you bandits or something? I'll untie you now." He pulled a knife from his belt and cut the ropes that tied her to the tree. Beatrice breathed a sigh of relief and fell onto her side, kneading her stiff arms. "Yes, bandits," she whispered in a great voice. "I need to get out of here as soon as possible. Get to town. Are those your dogs? Are you here with your parents?" "They're wolves, not dogs. But you don't have to be afraid. They're tame. I'm here alone. My dad is out there in the woods, in a hut. He used to be a gamekeeper and stayed here. It's a long way to town, and it'll be night soon. Let me take you back to our place. You won't get anywhere now anyway." Beatrice realized that she would not really get anywhere in her condition. Her head ached, her arms, legs, and back were stiff. She carefully stood up and obediently said, "All right, take me to your hut. But how do you live here in the forest?" "Very simply," replied the lad with conviction. "It's not so bad here. It's even good, to be honest. We're used to it." "I hope your animals won't bite me," asked Beatrice, glancing apprehensively at the wolves, who seemed to be driving her from behind. "No, they are not predatory. We have been raising them since they were babies. We rescued them from poachers a year ago. My dad knows exactly how to handle them." "That's good, of course. But who's been raising you since you were a baby? Don't you live here all the time? You have to go to school," Beatrice said, realizing that something had to be said, but not knowing what to talk about with this little boy. It was strange, very strange. and there was no telling where this boy would take her or what kind of a daddy lived in a hut. Yeah, well, I'm not going to school yet. I'll be sure to go sometime later. I guess I can read and write and count pretty well even now. My dad teaches me. The two of us live here, we like it, and I don't want to go to the city. How much further is it? I feel dizzy. I don't feel very well. I'd like to sit down and have a drink of water. Those scoundrels must have given me a good bashing on the head. Yes, we'll be there soon. Don't worry. The kid walked ahead on the trail, stepping on his sturdy booted feet. Daddy will get you drunk and fed at home. Don't worry, it's great here. You'll see, you'll love it. Yes, I can imagine. Beatrice thought without much hope. I bet he's either a sectarian or some nutcase living in the woods. He's dragging the child with him. I only hope he won't do anything bad to me, at least not in front of his son. But who knows? Looks like I'm in big trouble, Beatrice thought. And yet she asked, how far is it to town? I know it's nice here, but I can't live in the woods forever. I have a job there, and people will be looking for me. It's not very far. I'll walk you to the road tomorrow, and there I don't know if you'll catch a hitchhiker. We don't have a car, explained the boy. What will they look for? They won't find us here either, I think. Nobody knows about us. Dad doesn't want strangers to come to our house. Well, congratulations. I'm really going to visit a lonely lunatic, thought Beatrice, with a sort of cheerful annoyance. I hope he won't kill me, lest I should tell the town about his lair. It's a pity about the boy. Well, let's see who the gamekeeper is. They walked, contrary to the boy's promise, for quite a long time, though maybe it wasn't far on his legs. Beatrice, who was used to the asphalt, could hardly move her feet, stumbling over some holes and clinging to branches. But still the hut came into view, a good-sized hut, not a bad one, and evidently sturdy. Well, here's our house, said the lad, making a hospitable sign with his hand. Come on in, we'll get acquainted. This very dad turned out to be a grim-looking man traveling around the house in a wheelchair. The wheelchair had clearly been modified for the terrain it would be traveling on. The tires were big, wide. The owner said hello in a surly manner. Beatrice did not immediately realize that it was not because he was unhappy with the arrival of guests, but simply embarrassed by his position. This ant I rescued in the forest. The son began to explain. The bandits had stunned her, tied her to a tree, and I cut the ropes and brought her back because it was long and late to go to town. She has a headache and is thirsty. Well, that's right. Good for you for saving her. The man looked at Beatrice and continued. Have a seat at the table. There will be tea now. What kind of bandits attacked you? Do you know them? No, she answered, but they must have known somehow that I was going there. I had quite a bit of money on me. They took my phone too, my documents, I guess. Then they hit me on the head and dragged me into the woods. They tied me to a tree there. I guess they hoped I'd die somehow. They weren't what you'd call merciful. Here's some tea. There were some headache pills somewhere. But my advice is that it's better to make do with tea. It's good for you, with herbs. In addition to the tea, he put on the table some simple, but apparently nourishing food, invited his son, and told him to eat. The boy greedily gorged himself on the food, and Beatrice apologetically declined. Somehow she did not feel hungry at all. It was probably the shock of what had happened. I didn't even ask my savior's name. I'm Beatrice, she said to the boy. And I'm Alex. Nice to meet you, Alex. Beatrice shifted her gaze to the man, waiting for him to introduce himself. And I'm David, he said. Alex finished his dinner and finished his tea, but it was obvious he didn't feel like leaving the table from the general conversation. He probably didn't see many strangers, much less women, but it was also impossible not to notice that his eyes were already closing. Apparently tired of wandering through the forest, and his nose was already ready to peck the table. Okay, forest lifeguard, if you fall asleep at the table, there will be no one to carry you to bed, said the father. And Beatrice marveled at the change in his face at the sight of his son. He no longer looked stern or grim. It was evident that David loved Alex, and the boy seemed to know that and loved his father too. So he didn't argue, got up, said goodnight to everyone, and left behind the partition. You, too, as I understand, do not mind sleeping. I'll set you up somewhere in here now. Don't you bother. Well, tomorrow my son will walk you to the railway station. It's really not very close. You could get lost. Is he really wandering in the woods alone? It must be dangerous. Beatrice was really worried about this question. With a guard like that. Our wolves have seen our wolves, I suppose. Especially for me to accompany him. As you understand, is difficult. I mean, I can ride, but you see, not at such a speed, and he's used to it. We have lived here a long time. But how is it possible? After all, it is impossible for a child to live in the woods all the time. Or are you here only for the summer? Yes, no, not only. We've been living like this for 5 years now, and before that we often came here. I don't think that I'm not a hermit. I understand perfectly well that a child needs to live among people. I used to be a gamekeeper. But then I met with poachers, shot in the back, and there, he patted the wheel of his chair with the palm of his hand. Since then, it's been hard for me to go to town for some reason, and sending him there isn't the best option either. I mean, we don't have anyone else, so basically, if there's only one, it's to the orphanage. And what is it like for a child, who is used to such a life, to find himself in this very orphanage? Especially since I won't be able to visit him. So you can consider me selfish or whatever you want, but I don't know what will happen to us next. And the boy's mother? Beatrice asked cautiously. The mother, you say? My wife ran away from us before I was even injured. I mean, we didn't exactly live peacefully from the beginning. We only got married because Alex was due. And when he was 3, she ran off with her lover. We haven't heard from her since. I think if she knew what had happened to you, she would have come, well, at least for her son's sake, said Beatrice thoughtfully, who really did not understand this woman's behavior. She had no children, but she could not imagine how one could abandon one's own child, and under such strange circumstances. Here I don't think so, said the host thoughtfully. What's more, I'm sure she wouldn't have come back. That's not why she ran away. I honestly don't want her to come back, because she certainly won't come back to me. And if she takes my son, he'll end up in an orphanage anyway. I don't know how you'll find this strange or what, but she really was very indifferent to the child. You'll forgive me for prying. I just felt sorry for the boy. It's no good for him to live in the woods all his life, for he won't spend it that way. Though I realize he may be well off now, but you understand too. Yes, I understand. In the morning, Beatrice herself was surprised at her condition. She felt perfectly healthy. No pain in her legs or head, and her mood was good. Her host treated her to breakfast, fed her son, and gave her some money so that she could buy a ticket to town. Better go to the station, or you won't know who you'll catch on the motorway, lest something worse happen than it did. And the train is much quicker to get to town and safer. Thank you so much, Beatrice thanked her sincerely. You have a really lovely place here. May I come and visit you again sometime? After all, I owe you now, and I need to thank you for the way you treated me, and for Alex rescuing me. Of course you can come over. I can't say I'm always happy to have guests, but I won't refuse you. And don't consider yourself indebted. We helped you from the bottom of our hearts, the host said, and said goodbye warmly. Beatrice and Alex walked towards the railway station. Alex explained that it was a little longer than to the track, but it would really be more reliable. So they set off as usual, accompanied by the wolves. And if people see you with such unusual pets, won't they be scared? And won't they think it's strange? I don't think your daddy wants your being in the woods to be revealed at all, Beatrice asked. It would seem so, replied the boy. But I'm not going to the station, either. I'll just see you off. That's all, and then you're on your own. But don't you worry, I'll see that you get there. And I hope nobody attacks you. I leave the wolves out of the way so no one will notice. Besides, wolves are smart. They don't go near people. And people, if they see them from afar, they'll think they're dogs. They do look alike. And I also don't want to be noticed because of them. And I don't want to move to the city because of them. Because in the city, with wolves you can't live with them. It's not like I'm giving them to a zoo. Yes, I don't like zoos myself. But now they say there are some non-contact zoos or something like that, where the animals are not in cages, but walk around the territory. Well, almost as if they were free. Exactly, almost. My wolves are used to being out in the open. Besides, I don't know which are non-contact and which are zoos, and they won't let me live in a zoo. That's why I don't want to go to the city. You said it yourself. The woods are great. And why shouldn't I live here forever? The boy apparently sincerely did not understand why he had to leave the forest. Beatrice felt, though, that he wanted to know another life. That was what she spoke of. Well, wouldn't you like to be friends with other kids, play with them, go to school, and just to live in a real flat with a bathtub, electricity? You can play on the computer, watch TV. Have you ever watched a film or cartoons at all? Well, of course I used to, back when we had a flat. And then we also used to go to Uncle Michael sometimes, the one who brings us groceries. He lives in the city, but he goes to the woods a lot, because he says he can't go without the woods. I can't either, nor could any man if he lived a little as we have. Beatrice still caught the doubt in his voice, but realized that the boy was still very much accustomed to the life he had lived, and had not known or seen the other life from afar. I understand that you are used to living like this, but don't be in a hurry to give up the other life. I'm not giving up. And it's not even really about the wolves. It's just that Dad and I live in the woods. I can't leave him, and he doesn't want to go to the city. And he says we don't have a flat there now, so there's no place to live. And besides, he won't be able to get a job because, well, you saw. Beatrice sensed that this conversation was weighing on Alex. Even though he was still young, he must have thought about all this more than once, so it was better not to upset him unnecessarily. She decided to do otherwise, to settle her affairs and come to visit this strange couple one day, to talk to the boy's father about how they should live further, and then, through her own channels, to try to fix their lives. After all, the man suffered through no fault of his own. He can get disability, pension, alimony from his ex-wife and thus live with his son, even in a rented flat. They walked for quite a long time, but the time passed quickly, and soon the noise of electric trains could be heard from behind the trees. Well, here we are, Alex said. I won't go any further, or the wolves will lose me and look for me. And there are people there. You only have to cross this field and there will be a station. Well, have a happy journey. Thank you, Alex. Beatrice hugged him, kissed his cheek, and from his reaction she realized how much this very young boy missed his mother. Poor baby. His father is disabled, and probably not just because of his legs, and his head is messed up and his mother ran away. There are few mothers like that to nail, thought Beatrice, tears welling up in her eyes. Did you remember the way? Alex asked in a fallen voice. You promised to come. Will you come? Of course I'll come. But the road? Yes. I didn't really remember it. I don't navigate well in the woods. Well, I'll just get out at this station and go that way. And if I get lost, you or your wolves will meet me. Right? But I probably won't be back for a while. I've got a lot of problems too. Maybe in a week or later? Yes, that's a good idea that we'll meet you. The main thing is that you come, and we'll be waiting for you. They said goodbye. Beatrice walked towards the station, and when she turned round, the little figure was gone. She could not get her mind off the thought of that boy, of his father. Only as she entered the small station building did she remember that she had her own problems to deal with. Of course, those who had robbed her would be sought after, but first and foremost she herself wanted to figure out who had found out she was traveling with the money. Was there really a leak of information from some colleague or companion? Only a limited number of people knew about it, thought Beatrice. But it turned out that it didn't make the search that much easier. Anyone could be suspected. The small waiting room contained everything: the timetable, the ticket office, and the duty desk, where a woman sat in front of a working television, concentrating on eating seeds. Suddenly she was distracted from her occupation and shouted to one of the clerks. "Oh, Rachel, look. Our region's on the news. There's another accident on the motorway." "Did a car burn down?" the woman asked. "Hush, hush, they're talking now," and she turned up the sound. Beatrice came closer too, for she was interested. "The car is burned out completely, but we were able to work out the identity of the owner from the plates. It's Beatrice Smith, a businesswoman. Her husband has identified some metal parts of his wife's clothing and jewelry," the announcer reported. Next, John himself, her husband, appeared on the screen. In a breaking voice, he said, "I don't believe it was an accidental fire. She may have been carrying a large sum of money. I believe my wife is alive. After all, no body has been found and the jewelry could have been planted. The investigation is looking into the case. The police believe that the woman is not dead, and they have quite a few questions for her. The missing amount did not belong to her alone," the newscaster said in a stern voice. Next came some other news, and Beatrice stood like a dumbfounded woman. "Of course I'm alive, and all my jewelry is still there. I wasn't wearing much of it. A wedding ring, a chain, and a cross. It's all there. I don't know who ID'd what. And the car couldn't have caught fire on its own. It was clearly set on fire. What questions do they have for me? I have a lot of questions myself," she thought. But the only way to get answers was to go home. She bought a ticket, waited for the train, and went. And at home there was a closed door, and even a gate waiting for her. She couldn't get into her own house, even though she had the keys. Clearly, no one had guessed to take them out of her jeans pocket. Only it was no use, they didn't fit. The lock's been changed. Why? Beatrice thought. She'd only been away for 3 days. When she left, the lock had been in perfect order, and now she stood at the gate of her house like a stranger. She couldn't get in, and she couldn't call her husband to ask him what was going on, because the phone had been taken, and when he would come home, it is unknown. Whenever, but she couldn't stay at the door. She decided to go to his office. No car, no taxi fare, so she decided to go and pay on the spot. If John wasn't there, she could borrow money from someone she knew. I didn't get there in time. I saw my husband not far from the office, near some shop, and not alone. He was hugging some girl. Stop. Beatrice grabbed the chauffeur by the shoulder. He, probably frightened by her hysterical jerk, braked sharply. She was ashamed of herself, but everything seemed justified. Try to live through so many wild events in a few days. And for dessert, to see her husband in the arms of some, she jumped out of the car, ran up to John, and slapped him without further explanation. Aren't you burying me a little early, bastard? Beatrice, what are you doing? Beatrice, babbled the husband. His companion scurried away in horror. Beatrice looked back at the taxi she had to pay and saw that the car was gone too. The driver had chosen to leave. Who would want to get involved with a rowdy woman in a dirty sweatshirt and jeans, with unwashed, disheveled black hair? She couldn't explain to everyone that she had changed her clothes on purpose, not expecting that she would have to lie on the ground in the woods in this outfit. And then they wouldn't let her go home. All right, the taxi driver left and left. Now I have to deal with my husband. Why are you hugging that woman here? Beatrice, don't. It's a work thing. We're just working together. I'm sorry, Megan. This was already referring to his lady. Quite pretty, by the way. And then he turned to his wife again. You're alive, my darling. How happy I am. I didn't believe it, though they found some remains in the car. Remains of what? Me or what? Did you want to bury my burnt socks, or what was found there? My clothes are on me, you see. Jewelry too. Okay, if this was purely an office hug, I'm sorry, Megan, or whatever your name is. My husband and I need to go to the police, as although I wasn't murdered, I was very much wanted. John, let's go. Her husband politely said goodbye to his colleague, and with the same dazed look followed Beatrice to the police station, trying to clarify things along the way. She had calmed down a little, but she could not explain what had happened. She didn't understand. At the police station, she told everything that had happened, without mentioning the father and son living in the forest. The investigator recorded her statement, opened a criminal case, and promised to look into everything. Beatrice noticed that her husband was nervous, and this made her suspicious. When they left the station, She made no effort to hide it from John. I saw you on TV talking about what happened. You mentioned that I might have had a lot of money on me. How did you know about it? What do you mean, how? You said yourself it was possible. So I said it was probably true. After all, you had the money on you. I just figured that in that case the search would move more aggressively. And how did you identify my stuff? Is this an interrogation? I answered all the questions at the police station. Did you recognize it? What could I recognize? They showed me some charred objects, so I said they could be yours. I didn't say anything, I just said yes. Besides, they were taken from your car. I don't know why you're asking me. It's weird, this whole thing. All right, let the police handle it. But tell me, why did you change the locks on the house? Well, what's not to understand? I was advised to do so because your supposed death was criminal, and criminals are at large. It's not impossible that they would have come to our house as well to find more. There were no keys found in the car, not even the burnt ones, which means the perpetrators have them. I don't understand why you're so suspicious of me. You put up a fight, embarrassed me in front of my colleague. Well, I did apologize, although I don't quite understand why you have to hug your colleagues, and with such a happy look. And that's despite the fact that your wife is probably dead. You know, I didn't believe in doom. Now I don't know what we're talking about. Do you suspect me of something? Of what? Nothing, John. If I had any specific suspicions, I'd tell you. All right, let's go home. I need to clean up and rest. I need to get on with my life. The business is falling apart. I don't care about suspicion. Let the police sort it out. She didn't really like her husband's behavior. It was indeed suspicious, but now she just wanted to rest. Beatrice suddenly realized that her attitude towards her husband had changed. She couldn't explain what it was, but somehow she couldn't trust him as she used to. Talking about it, she decided to put it off for later, because for now she had nothing concrete, only the certainty that her husband was hiding something. As she thought about it, Beatrice's thoughts returned again and again to the people who seemed so sincere, to the father and son living in the forest. She wanted to help them, or at least just see them one more time. And just the next day, realizing that she couldn't solve her problems yet, she started planning a trip to the forest. The first thing to do was to buy something that would make both of them happy. Truthfully, she didn't know what that might be. And she didn't even know what kind of games kids Alex's age played. What kind of medication would help his father? And so she bought mostly delicious and unusual foods that her new friends had certainly never seen before, as well as a few books and toys for the boy. Realizing that she could hardly fulfill all their wishes, Beatrice comforted herself with the thought that next time she would buy what they asked for. Arriving at the forest, Beatrice simply walked in the direction where she thought the hut was located, as she had promised Alex. It was a long walk. Besides, she now had a rather heavy rucksack on her back. For a moment, Beatrice wondered if she would get lost and reach the right place. But everything went exactly as the boy had predicted. First, the wolves met her, and then Alex himself jumped out of the thicket. "Aunt Beatrice, have you come?" He ran up and hugged her. Apparently, he did it rather out of surprise, because normally he was a rather reserved boy. Beatrice responded by hugging him tightly too and laughed happily. "Alex, it's so good to see you. I thought I was lost and would never get out, didn't I?" "Really? I told you we'd wait and greet you, didn't I? I really didn't think you'd come so soon, but I walked this way just in case. And I told the wolves to watch out for you too, didn't I? Let's go home soon. Papa will be very glad too." David expressed his emotions in a much more subdued way, but it was still evident that he, too, was glad to see an acquaintance from the big world. Beatrice pulled some guests out of her rucksack, somewhat embarrassed. "Sorry, maybe I didn't bring exactly what I needed. But I didn't know exactly what you'd want or what you were expecting. Didn't think to ask last time. But I hope this isn't the last time we meet." "We hope so too," Alex said, leafing through the books with interest. "And what do we want? We don't know ourselves, because I don't think we need anything special. We have everything. But it's true, you have everything so unusual. So thank you very much anyway. It's really wasted on you. I mean, thank you, of course. I'll put the kettle on now, we'll have lunch together. It's just a shame about the wolves. I didn't bring anything. I just don't know what they want. I mean, I understand that meat, let's say, but it's too heavy to carry, so I left them without any guests. It's nothing, Alex assured her. They won't be offended. They know how to get their own food. They are predators, after all, but they're happy to see you without any gifts. We are too, by the way. Beatrice realized that the boy was not used to many things that were commonplace to other children, but he had friends that modern children do not dream of. After lunch, Alex ran to play with the wolves. He was used to always being near them and spend as much time as possible in communication. The adults didn't mind, especially since they also had a conversation. Beatrice had already told David in more detail about what had happened to her. She did not hide the fact that her husband had aroused some suspicions. She also told him about the visit to the police. Well, don't worry, David, I didn't mention you. I said I just spent the night in the woods. I realize you don't want to be found. Or would you like that after all? Do you know what, Beatrice? While I may want to, I'm even more afraid of it. You see, if Alex and I are found, they'll hardly rush to help us right away. Most likely they'll send me to some home for the disabled and him to a boarding school. We don't want that, the man said glumly. I understand you perfectly well, and you're probably right. But from the moment we met, I've been thinking about how I could help you, both of you, so that you wouldn't be separated, and at the same time change your lives for the better. I don't feel comfortable imposing, and if you don't mind, tell me I won't do it again. But I assure you, I won't do anything against your wishes. I want very much for you and Alex to be happy. While discussing this serious matter, Beatrice walked about the house, as was her custom. She did not know how to sit still. As she passed the curtain blocking David's bed, she caught it and noticed the picture of a beautiful woman hanging on the wall. She noticed it and froze. The face was familiar. She didn't immediately realize it was the same stranger her husband had hugged in the street. David noticed that the guest was interested in the portrait and explained, "That's my ex-wife. Don't think that I keep her portrait and hang it in plain sight because I still love her. I don't. And I can't even say that I loved her before, as I should have loved the mother of my son. Maybe it's my fault she's gone. And the portrait's just hanging there for no reason. To be honest, I wish Alex would never forget his mother, but for some reason he's not interested in her at all. Probably because she never treated him in a maternal way either and eventually left him." "Why, that needs no explanation at all," said Beatrice, embarrassed. "Just saw a portrait of a beautiful woman. That's all. And what's her name?" "Megan," came the expected reply. Beatrice decided not to mention that she had seen the woman, and quite recently too. She thought she should probably talk to Megan herself first and find out why she had abandoned her son by making such a decision. She informed David that she was already packing for the return trip. "I'd love to stay with you longer. I really like it here, but I have to go, things to do at home. And I don't even know where they will lead or where they will end up. Life has turned out to be a lot more complicated than I'd previously realized. Yeah, I wasn't quite prepared for this either. About your attempts to change our lives, I don't mind, but still, whatever you plan to do, please think properly. I don't want it to be for the worse. And in our case, it probably will be." Beatrice promised to be very careful, bade her farewell, and set out on her return journey. Alex accompanied her, as always, together with the wolves, and again they chatted about everything on the way. Again, Beatrice kissed him goodbye and said, "Perhaps I shall come again soon. I've learnt the road better now, so you needn't meet me. And I was thinking just now that since I have been so many times a guest of yours, it would be time for you to come and see me someday. I hope you won't mind?" "No, of course not," the boy rejoiced. "I'm always glad to. And Papa, I think, too. It's just a pity you can't take these ones with you." He pointed to his four-legged friends. "Yeah, can you imagine how horrified all the neighbors would be?" Beatrice laughed, waved her hand, and walked towards the train station. In town, she began her search for Megan. She did not dare to ask her husband directly. They rarely spoke at all after what had happened. It didn't seem like a quarrel, but rather as if they both suspected each other of something. The only thing Beatrice knew about Megan was her name, middle name, and that she worked with John at the same company. It was not insignificant, but it didn't make things much easier. as she didn't want to approach the employees to avoid gossip. After all, surely everyone was aware of their relationship, but there was no need to do so. Beatrice simply walked up to the office on her lunch break, and out of the door popped Joyce, the receptionist who considered herself the best friend of all the staff's wives. Unsurprisingly, she ran to John's spouse as well with a hug and a flood of sympathy. "Beatrice, I've heard of your misfortunes. How are you? The scoundrels are already being sought. I'm sure they will be found and punished. The police are very good. They're on that new TV show. You know, it's like 5 minutes to expose them all. Don't worry, take your vitamins. You're so pale. You should take care of yourself. Oh, you know what happened yesterday? One of us came into work looking pale, and suddenly, bang, she fainted. The ambulance came. They took her to the hospital. They said it was very bad." "Who was it? Wasn't it Sharon, that blonde?" Beatrice was wary, sensing that this meeting was no coincidence. "Ah, no, Sharon's fine, although she's been overdoing it on her diet. And Megan Wilson was taken away," Joyce faltered, apparently sensing she was talking about the wrong person. "Yeah, I know you hate to hear about her, but you know she's not doing well. Her health hasn't been good. I mean, really bad for a long time." Having parted from the talkative girl, Beatrice heaved a sigh of relief. She had learnt the name of the woman she was interested in and knew where she was now. She felt no sympathy for this Megan. She remembered that not only had she abandoned her sick husband and child, she was also in a relationship with her spouse. Sick. No wonder retribution has caught up with her. Must have been something feminine. But what is it? Why not visit the sick one? Beatrice went to the hospital. She was let in with a sympathetic look when she introduced herself as a relative. This already inspired some apprehension. Be that as it may, Beatrice clearly wished no harm to this woman. But as she entered the room, she realized that Megan's case was not good at all. It was no surprise that she had changed considerably since the portrait that now adorned the wall of the forest hut had been taken. People change. But the fact that she had changed so much in a couple of days was a complete surprise. Beatrice didn't even immediately realize that the woman in front of her was the same Megan. "Surprised?" she asked. Pale gray lips curved in a languid grin. "The very same Megan, your husband's mistress. You may rejoice, you have won. Soon I will be gone, and John will be yours alone." "Why do you say that? I didn't come for that at all. I'm sure you'll be all right. John and I are getting a divorce, so you can be together." Beatrice felt very sorry for having come here at all to see this unfortunate woman, whose days were in all probability numbered. But perhaps the fact that she would tell her that her son was alive and well would be a comfort to the dying woman. "Stop it. You don't have to comfort me. I'm glad you know about your husband, though it's strange that he's been lying to you for so long. We weren't a bad couple, but now it's ending. For almost 10 years I've been hoping I could beat this nasty thing. But no, it wasn't about John the first wanted to ask. I mean to tell you about your husband and son. I saw them just yesterday. You remember them, don't you?" Beatrice asked, tears springing to her eyes with pity. "I remember them, of course. Only I don't want them. They're alive and well, and all right. Yes, Beatrice, John and I are also a couple because of our fate. You lived with him and saw nothing. David believed me, but Alex isn't his child. He didn't realize. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I gave birth to him by your husband." "How could that happen?" "The boy is already 8 years old," Beatrice marveled. "So what? John and I have known each other since high school. I got pregnant by accident. We didn't expect to have children at all. What's the point? We were in the business of scams, and we were very successful. No time for kids, you know, moving around all the time. And then, out of the blue, we got pregnant. And that's when John was arrested. Yeah, well, it happens to the most successful con men. Thank you, he didn't give me up. On the contrary, he defended me. So I got David wrapped up before the belly was showing. I think the baby's gonna be with its father. I'll be in the middle of nowhere for a while, but I won't be alone. That's an argument too, you'd agree." John sat. Beatrice couldn't believe she knew her husband so poorly. "Well, yes, 3 years before I even met you. And I've been sitting through that time with David and Alex. And when our John came out, I decided I'd had enough. And you didn't want to be with your child. And now you don't want to know anything about him either. Beatrice couldn't believe what she was hearing. Such indifference to her son struck her more than anything else. But perhaps Megan didn't care so much. Her face darkened. She turned away, painfully holding back. I knew I was sick even then. That's why I didn't want him to get used to me. I knew I wouldn't live long. But I left David when John came out and he met you a while later. You think he fell in love? I don't get your hopes up. He was attracted to your business and money, and we've been with him all along. Megan appeared to be exhausted by this conversation. She leaned back on the pillow, breathing heavily. But we were careful, since you didn't even realize. So let's have no hard feelings. I don't have long now, you see for yourself. So we'll be together while I'm alive. It's not good for you, but you can't do that. Maybe you could get some help. Need anything? Beatrice really wanted to help this woman. I don't need anything. I've already got everything I'm due. Beatrice left, and her heart felt very heavy. Too many new things had been learnt that day. She did not know how to speak to her husband afterwards. It was clear that they could not be together. Well, if he's a crook and married her only for money, then isn't he the one who had something to do with the robbery she was the victim of? In this case, only divorce will not end the matter. But she never spoke to her husband that day. He did not come home. Beatrice suspected that the husband in the hospital had his beloved. Turns out he was. Megan had died in his arms. Beatrice sincerely sympathized with both the young woman who died and even her husband, albeit an ex-husband. She had taken part in organizing the funeral, which actually only she and John had attended. Yes, some grandmother, either a hospital nurse or some distant relative. John wept bitterly over the coffin, but soon he was arrested. The investigation was active, and it was already clear that he was the organizer of the robbery. Beatrice was present at the confrontation, at which her ex-husband, without looking at her, confessed candidly. I had a huge debt. I lost at cards and nobody was going to forgive me. There was no money, and I learnt that my wife was going to carry a large sum of money. To hear Beatrice say all this was unbearable. It turned out that John had organized not only the robbery, but also the attempted murder. He wanted her gone, to be burned in that car. The bandits decided not to take an unnecessary sin on their souls. That is, they took her to the woods and tied her to a tree. They hoped she would die of her own accord, eaten by wild animals, and at least it wouldn't be at their hands. The investigation was long and agonizing for Beatrice. Because of this, she did not visit her acquaintances in the forest for a long time. It was at the very end of the summer that she did get out to David and Alex to break the sad news of Megan's death. She told, after all, the deceased was his wife. But about the fact that he is raising a son who is not his own, did not talk. But it turned out that David knew it from the beginning. The news of Megan's death had left him almost indifferent. Caught up with her was all he said and asked, "Don't tell Alex." I won't tell Alex yet either. Maybe he'll find out when he wants to. He's too young now. He has never asked about her much. Thanks to her, there's a lot of things he doesn't need to know. I knew I wasn't his father. I met her when she was pregnant. She tried to convince me that it was from me, but who would believe it if she gave birth 7 months after meeting me? But I saw that it was very hard for her. She was alone. She told me that too when we met shortly before she died. Alex's father is my husband's ex. I mean, he and I didn't know each other at the time, and now we're divorced. And he's back in prison. This time for a much longer period of time. But really it's better that Alex doesn't know. By the way, I have a proposition for you. I told you I want to help you get out of the woods and into the city. I've been thinking about it a lot. And here's what I've got. My firm needs a head of security, and I'm offering you this place with accommodation. We'll draw up all the documents for you and your son, and he'll go to school. Are you kidding? What head of security? In case you haven't noticed, I'm in a wheelchair. David grinned. Yes, I have noticed. But I'm not a security guard, I'm a supervisor. You don't have to guard anything there. You'll just be sitting in your office, watching everything on the monitors, giving orders to the guards. It's not that hard. And the pay's not bad. It's enough for you and your son. And you can come here in the summer, if you want, like a holiday home. David thought for a while, but called his son to the council for a final agreement. Alex's face stretched. He liked the proposal less than his father. The first thing he did was to speak out on the issue that most concerned him. What about the wolves? You can't take them with you. Well, of course not. But they are free-loving animals. They will live in the forest, and we will visit them, Dad promised. I mean, they'll miss us. And so will I. And I'll worry about them. After all, the hunters might come, and then, well, there's no stopping the hunters from coming in front of us. It's good that you love animals so much, but you shouldn't give up your own life for them. Alex, after thinking for a while, agreed, but without much willingness. He was concerned about his friends, but no less afraid of the very human life that his father and Beatrice were trying to seduce him with. He did not find schooling, obedience to teachers, socializing with other boys so attractive at all. He was used to something quite different. Beatrice understood this, and David understood it too. But they were also well aware that he needed to go out into the world. Soon father and son moved to the city. Beatrice gave them 2 rooms in her house, and by the 1st of September Alex was enrolled in school. David, on the other hand, went to work. Neither father nor son were particularly happy about this change in life. David realized that it was silly to be ashamed of his disability, but he still felt very uncomfortable in his chair among ordinary people. Even though everyone treated him well, he felt out of place. Maybe not so much because of his disability, but simply because he was not used to living among people. The city, with its rhythm of life, was deeply alien to him, but he had a dream. He dreamed of saving up money for an operation. Even when he was lying in hospital after the wound, the doctor said that recovery was possible, but he had to be treated, and treatment costs money, which they did not have, as well as there was no hope of earning it. But now, thanks to his new position, there was hope. David realized that he had to get used to the normal life he had grown accustomed to during his years in the forest. Alex found it even harder. He was not used to anything because he had never known ordinary life, and he had to learn everything. He had come to school with an open heart, hoping that, as Aunt Beatrice and Papa had promised him, he would find new friends with whom he would have as much fun as with the wolves. But things turned out differently. The boy did not hide anything. He told the boys where and how he used to live, told them about his 4-legged friends. But instead of friendship, he received ridicule. His life seemed rather strange to the ordinary home kids. Some thought that he was just lying, and that he had never had any night wolves, but just lived somewhere in a remote village. Alex was immediately given the nickname Mowgli, and was called only that, which offended the boy very much. He was well developed physically, and in case of what could fight back, and therefore other guys were afraid to bully him too much, but nobody wanted to be friends with him either. At school, Alex held back, tried to keep himself independent, but when he came home, he often cried. When Beatrice caught him crying, she asked him, "What's the matter?" And Alex honestly answered, "You shouldn't have brought us out here. I miss the wolves. It'll be winter soon. They'll be cold. I mean, they're still very young. Besides, I'm afraid of hunters and evil people in general. We'll go to the forest during the holidays and you'll go and see them. I'm sure they'll be fine. Wolves are not little dogs that will disappear without people. Besides, they're smart and sensitive. They know how to avoid danger." Beatrice tried to comfort him. "Yes, that may be true," Alex agreed. "But I feel bad here myself. I feel as if I were a wolf who had come to the city and couldn't find his place among people. I don't like it at all. I don't like the school. I don't like the guys either. I haven't made any friends and I never will. Only enemies, I guess." "You will. I'm sure you will. You're just not used to it yet, and they're not used to you. You're from very different places, after all, and it's nothing strange that you didn't like it right away. But it's really nice here. Can't you see that it's much more comfortable for you and your dad?" These entreaties calmed Alex a little, and Beatrice hoped that gradually the boy would get used to it. David, she thought, was easier. He was settling into the job quickly. And although he didn't get along with people, he didn't feel any negativity. Or maybe he was just hiding it. After all, he was a man, not a little boy, and it was understandable that he would be ashamed to complain. Beatrice would have loved to help them both, but she realized that they were proud people, and to impose her help on them would be to offend them. But she wanted to help them, especially David. She had already consulted the doctors and knew that surgery would help him. But she didn't dare to just give the money. She knew he would refuse. David quickly got into the business, observed the work of the whole team, and finally noticed that something wrong was going on. Several employees, clearly in collusion, decided, it seems, to ruin Beatrice. By identifying the intruders in time, David was able to avert a serious danger. Beatrice was delighted with the timely actions of the head of security, and in gratitude still decided to offer to pay him for the operation. "I beg you very much, David, don't refuse," she urged him. "Take it simply as a bonus. You realize that if you hadn't noticed in time, I would have lost a great deal more." "Beatrice, well, it's just my job. I appreciate your attitude, but the bonus has to be adequate. And you're offering the kind of money I won't make for many years along with all the bonuses." David refused quite expectedly. "There's no need to exaggerate. All right, if you refuse to be grateful, then let the sum count as borrowed. You'll pay it back from every salary, that's all. I know you're saving up for the operation, so let's do it right away. I appreciate your ego, but you have to be reasonable." "Okay, I agree with you. But aren't you rejoicing that the conspiracy has been uncovered too soon? After all, the instigators were never identified. Could you give out this bonus after I've fully investigated the case? You'll figure it out much faster when you're on your feet. And that won't happen until after the surgery. And don't you realize that not only do you need you at work, but your son needs you healthy?" David agreed and went to the hospital. Perhaps it was premature. The intruders, taking advantage of his absence, decided to put pressure on Beatrice and still force her to sign the documents on the ownership of the company. The easiest way to do this was with the help of Alex. One day the boy was kidnapped and taken away to an unknown destination. At first Alex was frightened. He was roughly grabbed, put on the back seat of the car and told to keep quiet. But the kidnappers themselves did not keep silent, apparently fearing nothing. "Where are we going to keep him? He could run away or make a fuss. We can't just keep him in the basement of a building, can we? I've got a place in mind. A gamekeeper used to live there a while back, very principled. So I shot him to keep him out of the way while hunting. I don't know what happened to him, but his hut is still there. Yeah, maybe there's no people around, no matter what you shout or scream." And Alex realized that he was being taken to his and his father's house. It calmed him down. He knew the neighborhood very well. Besides, he had loyal friends there, and soon Alex's kidnappers got to know them. It was impossible to pass by car, so they had to walk. But not for long, the wolves ran out of the forest, having heard the boy's call, and quickly realizing what was happening, pounced on his enemies. Alex only had to use the kidnapper's phone and call for help. Soon the kidnappers were in for a real beating. Alex was taken home right into the arms of an anxious Beatrice, who couldn't wait to tell David the good news. The operation Dad had undergone had been a success. When David returned home, he found his son and Beatrice no longer just friends, but family. He himself had to undergo rehabilitation, during which his relationship with Beatrice became closer. A year later at their wedding, he confidently walked with a cane, and soon it became clear that there was even more incentive for a speedy recovery. His young wife announced that they would soon have a baby boy.